Okay, this is the third lesson in a lecture series on how the United States is starting a new Cold War. We're focusing on Russia, new Cold War with Russia. And this is more background information. I say here that no one should be surprised that the USA is driving a new Cold War, given the USA's extensive warmonger history. All right. Now, I fully expect a big backlash. I fully expect a big attack wave in social reality, which is baseless and ridiculous, not based on the facts. All right. And so this attack, I expect, I don't know. I'm expecting this. They're going to attack saying, oh, it's not true. Those wars aren't true. U.S. didn't fight those wars. Right. Or they'll say, oh, those were defensive wars. Someone attacked us. Or what they'll do is they'll fish for and try to pick up some isolated incident, right? To see we're attacked. I don't know. Like maybe when the Israelis hit that spy ship that we had, what was that during the 7 Day War, or when the North Koreans took the USS Liberty, right? I mean, those are isolated instances which did not result in war. I'm talking about wars we fought, right? People will find some bullshit distortion to try to deny this. So Americans tend to believe that U.S. is a peace-loving nation. I swear. Not all Americans. A lot of Americans will say, well, think about today, maybe not, but the majority of Americans still think USA is peace-loving. Nothing is further from the truth given the basic raw historical facts that say the exact opposite. In reality, the USA is a warmonger nation fighting 675 war years in its 244-year existence from 1775 to 2019. I accumulated these numbers last year. All right, that's 2.77 wars every damn year. So every damn year we fight almost 3 wars every year of our existence, with only a rare few wars being defensive. All right, here's a handful of examples. Barbary wars, when the Barbary pirates attacked our commerce. I mean, you can't let them attack our commerce. That's our economy. So you got to fight these guys, a bunch of pirates. And then the Quasi Wars, which the French attacked our commerce, right? Mostly in the Caribbean. That was during the French Revolutionary Wars, the Wars of the First Coalition, basically 1792 to like 97. I think the war started like 96, the Quasi War, around there. Pearl Harbor, we were attacked by the Japanese, and then 9/11 were attacked, right? I mean, the vast majority of wars, no one's attacking us. We're attacking someone. And in these wars, make no mistake, U.S. is expanding territory. U.S. is grabbing resources. All right? I don't know how you argue against this, but you can only argue against this if you have extreme delusion, if you know nothing, right? So I say here, how is this extreme delusion possible? One, Americans know zero of the real facts on U.S. wars. Two, people believe what makes them feel good. People believe what they want to believe, which is what makes them feel good. It's all about self and ego and pride. Three, the masses always fall for and believe social reality. So I expect a social reality attack wave. A big wave of people saying blah, 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 it's all bullshit, right? What do they know? What are they based upon? What facts? Nothing. But if everyone says it, it's real in their brains. So I want to show you basic historical facts on the frequency of U.S. wars. Okay, and I'm not going to focus on the colonial times, but really from the start of the U.S. colonization, I guess white colonization of the American continent here. Uh, we've been at constant war. Excuse me. All right. Okay, so Jamestown was settled in 1607. All right, colonists arrived, and then within a couple of years, we're fighting a bunch of wars. All right, and it's like nonstop wars. Right here's two wars: Beaver Wars and Anglo Powhatan Wars. All right, but it's nonstop every damn year. All right, single, multiple wars. All right. Now, whenever you see red, it's against Indians, and whenever you see red, all right, uh, these are expansionist wars. In some way or another, they're related to expansion. All right, either we're fighting a war to expand, or we expanded their territory and fighting off their attempts to, you know, block white expansion into the territory, taking away their land, taking away their resources, causing them to suffer, and going to go deprivation, starve and die, whatever, causing them to have to go off into other Indian lands and fight other Indians and then die with that, right? And when you see gray here, it's the rare cases when there wasn't wars, right? But you see that it's constant war. Now I'm going to start here with this blue section here. This is 1775. And I call this the real Declaration of Independence because the official Declaration of Independence, of course, as you know, was in 1776. But that was only a formality. The real Declaration of Independence was when we went to war. Right? That's when we said we're independent. For real. Right? So this is the starting point of our nation, I say. Right? Even though the Constitution wasn't ratified to what 1787 or 8 or something like that, right? But really, this is when America started as an independent country. We're breaking it free here. So gray is when there's not wars; it's rare. Red is wars against Indians, right? And pretty much every single one of these you could say is an expansionist war, right? No, the Indians attacked us. No, who's moving into their territory? Right? We started with the postage stamp at Jamestown, right? Then took the whole damn continent, and then moved overseas and controlled resources overseas, um, and markets. All right, so here's the Revolutionary Wars, and then we're fighting the Cherokee Wars. It's in the East, Southeast USA, right? All right, so constant wars. Oh, a couple years when there's no war. How about that? Right, here's the Quasi War against the French. Here's Barbary War against the Barbary pirates. A few years of peace, right? More Indian wars, more pirate wars. Okay, Indian wars, a lot of Indian wars, right? Mexican American War. This is where we stole the Southwest U.S. Right? We initiated this war. We provoked this war. We started this war. I taught you the Mexican American War just recently. I know 99.99999% of Americans aren't going to remember a thing, right? But if you want to debate this, go back and view my video. All right, and then we got a period where we're fighting many wars at the same time. So here, max is like 4, but now we're getting in a period where we're fighting 7 wars at the same time. 7, 7, 6, 7, right? And then here, right during the Civil War, we're fighting 8 wars at the same time. All these, we're fighting against the South. We're also fighting against all these Indians, right? Uh, all right, and here is the Spanish-American War, all right, and then related to that is the Philippine-American War, which with the Moro Rebellion was Philippines, all right, where basically the Filipinos first welcomed Americans as liberators, but then they quickly realized that we didn't come in to liberate them. We just came in to take over and control them. So it took us about 15 years of war to suppress the Filipinos. Then we're fighting all these banana wars, wars in Central, South America. It was about U.S. expansion of resource control overseas, right? So we're always fighting wars, and I know Americans aren't going to know anything about these wars, so they're going to say, "Oh, they're all defensive wars. Someone's attacking us." No, even for example, you take Well, Barbary War, these damn pirates, you can't allow them to interrupt our commerce, right? French are screwing our commerce. They're capturing U.S. ships, and but even this one, they're we weren't totally clean. Um, this is during the French Revolution Wars, and the key opponent. I mean, France is fighting a coalition, but one opponent was Britain, and we're trading with Britain. In fact, we have a trade treaty with Britain, the J Treaty, right? And the French got pissed off with that, so we're trading with their enemies. So they start taking our ships. I mean, the whole issue back then of neutrality for commerce, right? You know, but we had a trade treaty with with Great Britain. We weren't totally clean, you know. Uh, but Pearl Harbor, I showed you Pearl Harbor. I taught you Pearl Harbor, how the FDR administration both maneuvered Japan into attacking, and then opened the door for a successful attack. I I showed you how that was done, right? Uh, but again, World War II was our good war. That was the war that we had to fight. All right, we were fighting against some pretty bad situation there. Some pretty serious evil in Nazi Germany too. 9/11, right? I showed you how all the U.S. created conflict in the Middle East, and how part of that was a spin-off of this, right? I showed you how Bin Laden's motives, about six of his motives for war, his six primary motives for, all centered back on the first Gulf War and its outcome, especially the WMD inspections and the sanctions on Iraq, which, for example, resulted in killing 565,000 Iraqi kids. And that was one of Bin Laden's main beefs against the U.S. Right? Why he attacked us. Right? What does the media tell us? Oh, he's just religious fanatical. He hates Christians. He thinks you're all infidels, and he's gonna. That's not true at all. I read a book full of his speeches and writings compiled by Bruce Lawrence. Right? He never mentions that once. Well, we want to kill them because they're infidels. Right? Um, all right. So I showed you the chart. I showed you how the U.S. is constantly fighting wars. They're expansionist wars. Now, rationalizing, lying patriots will say, okay, so we fight many wars. I mean, many will deny that. No, we don't. I don't believe it. I just showed you. Right? All you got to do is Google list of USA wars. Right? You'll probably get 20 websites listing all these wars. Right? And then what? And then do what I did. Make a chronological chart year by year, and then list when they are, and then add up the war years. We fought 675 war years in 244 years of existence. Right, almost 3 wars every damn year of our existence. All right. So they'll say, okay, we fight many wars, but only against the bad guys who attack us. No, we're attacking them and try to steal our stuff or hate our freedom. I mean, that's what George W. Bush fed the American public, which I bet a lot of Americans ate up. A lot of simple rednecks. Uh, oh, yeah, the terrorists hate our freedom. That's why they attacked us. Right? Freedom. That is a total lie. Almost every single U.S. war has been for territorial expansion, taking away land from some weaker group, or controlling resources in some way, not only within our continent, but overseas as well, controlling their markets, getting access to their markets. Or they have been modern industrial wars for more sophisticated economic means of profit, which I taught you a couple last time, right here. I'm not going to review all this. I can't review it all if you don't remember, which, again, the 99.999999% don't remember a single bit of that. But, you can't keep teaching it over and over again, everything. Um, or the liars will say, no, Our wars are all great patriotic wars. I swear I've had people tell me that. Well, what is a patriotic war? Oh, we're the good guy. I hate patriots. I honestly do. So many Americans are patriotic, right? But I hate them, literally, because why? They're not about what's true, what's just, what's moral, what's right before God. They're about egocentric, self serving, self deluding, and they're liars, right? Making themselves feel good and whipping themselves up. It's all about feeling good. It's not about what's true and just. And honestly, people like that make me sick. That's why I hate them, right? Why don't you stick to something that's moral and just and true and right before God? A lot of Christians are that way. They really put themselves first. All right, so I'm going to give a small sample of U.S. expansionist war. So, I want to show you that this is what we're doing, right? These wars are not defensive wars, right? Very few people are attacking us. Pearl Harbor, 9/11, right? Normally we're taking it to someone else, we're expanding. We were the up and coming people who pushed our way and controlled this whole continent. So, I'm giving you a small a sample of expansionist wars. I'm skipping many, many wars. All right, this is just a sample. All right, to give you an idea that our wars are expansionist. All right, so you got to keep in mind this: we started as a white nation. I mean, I'm not white, but you can say our nation I guess you could say it's white because it was, initially and predominantly, it still is predominantly white. Um, we expanded from Jamestown. That's the first white settlement there, British settlement, right about there in Virginia. All right, and the fort at Jamestown was about the size of a football field. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they're cultivating fields larger than that, but the fort itself was no bigger than a football field, probably smaller than a football field. How do we expand from a football field to the whole continental USA, plus Alaska, plus Pacific Islands, plus territories, plus overseas possessions, controlling resources of nations around the world, right? Um, all right. Okay. So what do I say here to all the U.S. In 1607? You had the first white settlement. They're starving. They're fed by the Indians. But within just 2-3 years, Americans waged near continuous wars on the Indians, taking their land until the first 13 colonies were formed. Right. Okay. So you're right. You're right. And then we went further. With the Revolutionary War, we acquired control of the Northwest Territory from Britain. That's this area here: Wisconsin, Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Michigan. All right, right. The British weren't giving it up though. The British were reneging on that deal. They maintained forts there, and they kept fueling arms to the Indians, uh, preventing us from occupying this territory. Of course, the Indians wanted to not die and starve, and they wanted to fight for their land. All right, so on June 18th of 1812, now you got the War of 1812. The U.S. declared war in England. Did England declare war in the U.S.? No, the U.S. declared war in England, so we started this war. But we said we started it because ostensibly for impressment of American sailors, right? And because of the 1807 Order of Council, in which Britain was trying to block our trade with continental Europe, all right, the Napoleonic Empire, all right. Now I say ostensibly because both of these were bullshit reasons. Now, first of all, uh, these American sailors, well, were they really Americans? The British policy was to uh, take British deserters from the British Royal Navy, take them off U.S. ships, and pull them and put them back on British ships. Now, Britain did this because a big part of their strategy was to surround the continental Europe, have a blockade around the whole continental Europe, blocking off commerce, and so killing the economies, especially blocking off the seaports around critical rivers, right? Killing their economy and creating opposition to Napoleon, right? But to do so, they needed a lot of naval resources, a lot of naval ships, and to do that, they needed the sailors. So they're pulling off these uh, people who they said were British deserters, and I'm sure the vast majority were, right? We say they're Americans. Most of these guys are British deserters, right? Now, could it have been that some of these British, ex-British people got American citizenship? It's possible, but both Jefferson and Madison, is it Madison? I'm forgetting now. I know Jefferson, Madison. They did not issue letters of naturalization, so they could not prove that they were U.S. citizens, right? So it's possible that some Americans were pulled off, right? The vast majority were actually British deserters, right? And this policy was going on for 19 years from the beginning of the war. You know, why all of a sudden, is it critical something to go to war for when it's been done for 19 years? All right, it's bullshit reason. You'll see the real reasons coming up here in a second. And then we said, oh, the British are obstructing our trade with continental Europe, right? Well, that's through the 1807 Order of Council, which was in response to Napoleon's, what did he call it? Where he basically blocked off a trade with England, barred any European ports from trading with England. England said, okay, fine. Well, we'll just blockade all your ports, right? We'll see who screams first, right? Now, but the thing about it is, Britain rescinded the Orders of Council only 5 days later. So they took away the U.S. excuse. Why did they do that? No doubt because they didn't want to fight a two-front war. They're in a life and death struggle in Europe with Napoleon, right? Their backside is vulnerable, right? They can't dedicate the forces, the materials to fight this war. They're stretched thin, right? And no doubt I'm telling you, that's the reason why we struck there. The key reason why we struck is because England was entangled in the Napoleonic Wars. Or that's not. We'll get to other reasons in a second here. All right. But they rescinded that. So they basically cut the legs from the U.S. Reasons for going to war by rescinding this order. Right. So that's a bullshit reason. That's just like the North passing the Corwin Amendment, guaranteeing the right for the South forever to have slaves. After the South seceded, saying, "Oh, they're trying to free the slaves. They're trying to free the slaves," and the North saying, "Wait a minute. No one's trying to free the slaves. In fact, we'll guarantee to an amendment to the Constitution that you have your slaves forever." All right. So it was meant to undercut their rationale for going to war. Their bullshit surface story, excuse for going to war. So both of these were bullshit pretexts. The real reason that the USA started the war in 1812, I mean, it was more involved in this, right? It had to, you go to larger strategic analysis here, but a key thing was the opportunity that was afforded to the USA by the Napoleonic Wars, right? Britain's locked up, in battle for its life. Spain is locked up, right, getting its butt kicked by Napoleon, right? So it was the last opportunity to kick out the last remaining competitor to U.S. ownership of the entire North American continent. Keep in mind, France sold out in 1803 with the Louisiana Purchase. They're out of the continent. They're not a competitor. Spain is still in there, but Spain at the time was getting its butt kicked in its colonies, right? Let's see here. Britain was fighting for its life. Spain was losing all its possessions in revolutions throughout Latin America. So now, the sole remaining potential competitor to American domination of all of North America, however south, how far south we wanted to go, right? And all of Canada would have been Great Britain, right? Get them kicked out now while they're weak and fighting a life and death struggle against Napoleon, all right? Let's see here. What do I want to say? Spain was losing all its possessions. Okay. Oh, okay. So that Britain could not contest U.S. control over the Northwest Territory, right? Louisiana Purchase, Oregon Territory, and Canada. So the idea is this: with our Revolutionary War and the Treaty of Paris that concluded it, Britain ceded over the Northwest Territory. Here is Wisconsin. Well, that's UP, Michigan, right? Here's Michigan. Here's Indiana. Here's Illinois. Here's Ohio, right? This is considered the Northwest Territory. It's Northwest because this is where they were back then, right? I mean, today here's the Northwest, right? But back then this is called the Northwest Territory, and we possess this according to the treaty. Of course, the Indians live there. That's their land, and the British did not leave. They maintained forts there, so they're reneging, right? And they're providing arms to the Indians here and arms to Indians up here, for basically they're fighting a proxy war, right? They got their main effort in Europe, right? You can fight a proxy war in cheap. You get committed Indians who want to protect their lives and land here, just give them some weapons. They'll fight the Americans, right? So they're fueling weapons to the Indians, all right? And the British are doing so. They said because they wanted to give a nation to the Indians. Oh, bullshit. They didn't care about the Indians. They're caring about protecting their land. They're caring about controlling the flow of commerce on the Great Lakes, which would open up this to development, right? They're worried about contesting with America all the rest of this land. All the rest of this land was wide open. Where the border was is open to, you know, a struggle here, right? Now, U.S. knows this. The 49th parallel was established with the Oregon Treaty in 1846, right? So this was all open. Who knew where our continent was going to be? Well, get the British kicked out. We don't have to worry about this. Right? They're going to fight tooth and nail to push us down, to get it all. Right? In fact, President Polk was one of the reasons why he started the war in Mexico was he feared that the British were going to take California still. That's in 1846. He's worried about that. Right? British coming down, taking California. He coveted the California ports. So you get the British out now, you don't have to worry about this. Plus, you got Canada as well. All the resources, all the seaboard of Canada, resources and seaboard of Canada. They got great agriculture right in this area here. This is their bread belt right about here in Canada. Like a bread basket. All right. So Spain was weak. Why was Spain? Spain was fighting revolutions throughout the entire continent, including Brazil, which is Portuguese, but you can consider that part of Spain. Right, they were together. Right, so all this was under revolution, all starting around 1810. Why? Because in 1808, Napoleon invaded Spain. To prevent basically all the flood of goods coming into Spain. Remember, he tried to have his continental system. Yeah, that's what they call it, continental system, which he blocks all goods from coming into continental Europe, British goods, while stuff was flooding into Spain. So he invades them. All right, there's a Peninsula War. Spain is invaded. Spain is weak. Spain is occupied by France. Right, they had their hands full here. So the colonies over here said, "Hey, this is our chance," and it was a jailbreak. They all declared independence. All underwent revolutions. Right. So I guess the only things that didn't go were French Guyana, Dutch Suriname, and British Guyana. Right? Everything else went. Whole damn Central and South America, except for those little bits there, were in revolution. Spain was weak. Spain could do nothing. Right? So our back was protected. We didn't have to worry about losing on the backside here when we go up into Canada. Let's see here. So we took advantage of the Spanish Revolution to seize all Spanish Florida. Yeah, that's another thing we did. So in 1810 they start all these revolutions. Well, 1810, right? We seize West Florida. Now, Florida, we know today as being this down here, and a little bit of the Panhandle up to like Pensacola. What else is over there? Pensacola. Yeah, right. Uh, well, Florida back then went all the way to the Mississippi. Here's New Orleans. Mississippi comes up through here, right? So what do we do? In 1810, we give statehood to Louisiana. We start at the starting point. We start at the westernmost part here, and we mark our territory. This is like a dog peeing on a tree here to mark its territory. We set the demarcation here. We said Louisiana is a state. This is our territory, right? And we said at the Pearl River, which is beyond the Mississippi. Here's the Pearl River right around here, right? All right, and then piece by piece, we took West Florida going back this way. So why do we do that? Because Spain is getting its butt kicked, and they're weak. They couldn't do anything, right? So we're going to take it. West Florida, Louisiana statehood, 1810. The 1813, we attacked Mobile Bay. 1814, we attacked Pensacola. Mobile Bay is Alabama's port axis, right about there, right? Alabama, yeah. Let's see here. Where were okay? And then 1816, we invaded the main part of Florida with attack on the Negro Fort. 1816, you have war against Spain and UK. First Seminole War, this is a part of this first Seminole War, and then 1817 we took Spain's Amelia Island, right about there. Okay, so we're expanding. Why? Because it's opportunistic. Spain can't do squat. They're getting their butt kicked down here. What can they do against us if we go and take this? So we occupy all this, all right? And then we have the treaty with Spain called the Adams-Onis Treaty, which we paid for a bunch of money, and then it officially made it official that this is our territory, right? But we seized it first. I mean, come on, right? We took West Florida, right? Give statehood to Louisiana, right? We're marking our boundaries. It was like a dog pissing, to mark its territory here, right? And then we said, okay, we'll leisurely just take the rest here. Okay, we cut this off. All right. Then we annexed coastal Mississippi and Alabama. That's there's Mississippi, there's Alabama, a little bit there, and then only then did we buy it from Spain. That's the Adams-Onis Treaty of 1819. All right. So another thing is in 1829, gold is discovered in Georgia. Right. It kicked off the first big U.S. gold rush. All right. Now the gold discovered was in northeast Georgia, which is kind of like north central, right about there, and that was one of the factors. But the main factor was the hunger for land, especially with cotton becoming a major profitable industry due to some technological innovations. Key of which was the invention of the cotton gin by Eli Whitney. All right, that was about 1793 or so. That really caused a boom in the demand for slaves and for cotton slave plantations. They became rich. The slave plantation owners producing cotton became as rich as kings in Europe. All right, they were the richest people in the United States, richer than anyone commercial in the Northeast here. Right, the richest people were the most concentrated wealth were in these slave plantations. Although the South was desperately dirt poor as a whole, high concentration of wealth. Uh, uh, and these combined, but really, mostly, but gold as well, pushed for the 1830 Indian Removal Act. Right, the Indian Removal Act said we're going to remove the Indians to west of the Mississippi. Right, so here's the Mississippi coming up. There's New Orleans, kind of comes up this way, kind of goes somewhere in Minnesota, I believe, up there. All right, that's where it starts, somewhere up there. Push the Indians west of there. right? Wonder when the Indians moved out of Minnesota, like 1840s or 50s, because the Sioux Indians were in Minnesota. Then they became the Great Plains Indians, and I mean that kicked off a bunch of Indian wars where the Sioux basically went in there, started kicking ass, because they're pushed out by Americans, right? um, okay, so Indian Removal Act, right? And with the Indian Removal Act, that forced out the westernized Indians, the civilized Indians, the five civilized tribes, right? These guys civilized. They took on American farming methods. Why? Because they wanted to be get integrated into American society and culture. Oh, I mean that's what we said they had to do. Oh, but it didn't work. All right, they're still Indians. We're gonna kick you out, take your land. All right, it was all about opportunity for the whites, and they suffered. One, there were many. The Indian removal the act resulted in the Trail of Tears, and the Trail of Tears focused on the Cherokee largely, right? But every damn tribe, all the five civilized tribes that were forced out, everyone lost around 1 in 4, right? Look at the numbers, right? I got them somewhere. Look at about 1 in 4 people died along the way, and they're all forced to go to Oklahoma, right, west of the Mississippi. That became Indian territory. All right, we'll give you Oklahoma because it's good for nothing here. You can have that. All right. All right. You go live there. But on the way going there, 1 out of 4 died. Can you imagine that? Right. I mean, well, that's why they called it the Trail of Tears. But it wasn't just the Cherokee. It was all the tribes went through the same thing. I don't know why they just focused on the Cherokee. All right. All right. So now, of course, American patriots are going to say USA, USA. Yeah, who cares, right? All right, all right. You're just a bleeding heart. Oh, come on, right? Right. People don't give a damn about what happens to other people as long as it's pro self. Um, all right. So then, going a little further, 1873, we had the Coinage Act, and what was the other act there? Basically, when they put the the greenback on the gold standard, that was like 1875. Right? But both of these put us on the gold standard combined, right? And that made gold more valuable. But then in 1874, hey, what happens? Gold is discovered in the Black Hills, and that kicks off the Sioux War. But really, that's only the minor trigger. The real trigger was the Northern Pacific Railroad going through there. They had to get the Indians off, right? Then in 1877, they discovered gold in the Paulus area. Paulus area is the area that's kind of around Oregon, Washington State, western Idaho. That area there is called Paulus. It's very fertile. It's great land for wheat growing, but they also discovered gold in that area, and that kicked off uh, a war on the westernized Nez Perce. So these guys were westernized also, doing what they said. That's what America promised. That, hey, listen, you pick up farming, we'll give you the tools, we'll help you out here. They provided tools, they provided grain mills and so forth, right? You know, I mean, they kind of failed there, but and they said we'll protect you so long as you west. Man, they moved them out too, right? That, so they waged war on the Nez Perce Indians, and I say the real underlying reason was Western expansion, railroad construction, and resource production. And this was a backbone of our economy, and I'll teach you that when we get into. I'll briefly touch upon that when we get into the Spanish-American War. That's coming up a little bit. And this Western expansion, railroad construction, was made possible by the Civil War. All right, the Civil War, when the South seceded, that basically removed Southern political opposition to pro-Western legislation, which made possible the rapid Western expansion, railroad construction, resource production. That drove the U.S. economy from the Civil War until 1893, when the economy crashed. All right, that was a big panic in '93. All right. Now, in 1835, we're going to jump back in time a little bit. You had the Texas Rebellion, but the Texas Rebellion really started in 1830. right? When Mexico passed its April 6, 1830 law stating, all right, no more Americans coming over, immigrating into our land. We're cutting it off. You got to pay taxes. You're not paying any of your taxes, right? You got to pay tax. And no more slaves. Mexico is a slave-free nation. That's against the law here. They had a dispensation for a while. So they legally were allowed to have slaves. The only people allowed to have slaves were Americans. But now they're saying, see, this dispensation is running out, right? And it ran out, the agreement ran out in 1830, and now they're enforcing that with a law. But do you think the Americans followed the law? Americans said, screw you, right? So the rebellion started. What do they call it? The tax rebellion, right? It was all of this though, immigration, taxes, and no slaves, right? That was like 1830 or 1831, the first one, right? Where the Mexican government came in and said, trying to enforce it, make the Americans follow the law. Well, Americans are going to do whatever they want. And then they tried again in 1835. So really, this is a continuation of this 1830, right? And then, of course, the Americans won that war. General Santa Anna was captured. Uh, he was forced to sign the Treaty of Velasco, which was a bogus treaty for across the board. In every way, it wasn't worth toilet paper. Honestly, it wasn't worth wiping your butt with. All right, one, General Santa Anna was not president. American and even American history historians say that. Why don't they research this? Coro was president, according to the Mexican Constitution, selected by the Mexican Constitution, Congress, according to their Constitution. Santa Anna did not have the authority to sign that. Plus, he was under duress. They were screaming to execute him for the atrocities at Goliath and Alamo. He basically he hung everyone or executed everyone, all the American survivors. Well, he had the right. I mean, what is U.S. law? U.S. law to this day is punishment for sedition against our country is capital punishment. You get executed. Well, he was carrying out Mexican law, right? They were under sedition, trying to destroy the government, break away. If that happened in the United States, Americans would be pissed off. But we don't see it that way. We see them as heroes, right? Um, so they're pissed off and they want to execute him. They're scrambling to break in to his cell. In fact, pistols were fired at his door. And Santa Anna's scared. And then Santa Anna signed it, no doubt knowing that he's not president. It's not worth the paper it's written on, right? And then another thing is the Mexican Congress did not ratify it, so it had no legal basis, right? And then in addition to that, the Mexican government disavowed any actions taken by Santa Anna, right? I mean, he wasn't even president. Why did he have to do that? So based on that, the Texan says, "Oh, we own all of Texas up to the Rio Grande." All right. Now Mexico's saying, "Well, wait a minute, right? There's no such thing. There's no treaty on that, right? This is still Mexican territory under rebellion." So that's the way Mexico saw it, which they were legitimate, right? Now, based upon the Treaty of Velasco, which was illegitimate, the United States in 1845 annexed Texas in December. We took Texas, right? That's an act of war. Mexico's saying, wait a minute, that's still U.S. I mean, that's still Mexico. And then we had the Mexican-American War, and this was a totally provoked, U.S. provoked war. 7 acts of war, all right, including taking Texas, stealing their land, invading their land. U.S. forces invaded Texas about 4, 5, 6 months. When did they do that? Like July 45, before we annexed it. So U.S. forces occupied it under orders to take to take it all the way to the Rio Grande, right? And we did other things. We had a naval blockade of the mouth of the Rio Grande, which is an act of war. What else did we do? We did a number of things there. 7 acts of war. Off the top of my head, it's not coming to me. Um, all of them, but I listed them out there. And then the Slidell fait accompli, right? The two reasons Polk stated to request war against Mexico from Congress was one, American blood's been spilt on American soil. Well, okay, American blood was spilt on American soil, but it was after an American invasion of Mexican land. It was Mexican land invaded by Americans, right? Um, and then the Slidell. Now, 9 times Polk is on record saying he's going to ask Congress for war based solely upon the Slidell rejection. Slidell, if you recall, I just taught this. If you recall, was the American emissary who was sent down there under false pretenses, under conditions which were designed for him to be rejected. They set it up against the agreed upon conditions of the meeting. They violated that, right? And he was sent down there with no power to negotiate, no power to settle anything, no power to buy California or the New Mexico territory, right? There wasn't even an attempt to get the money for that at that time. They sent them down. Polk did not even lift a finger to get the money. How are they gonna offer when Congress hasn't even approved any funding for that, right? And they sent them down there only with the mission to jam Mexico with a huge demand. You pay us reparations for our blah 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 blah. All the war here, all the stuff that these guys caused with all the damage caused by their rebellion. Oh, you can pay for that. Trying to get Mexico to pay for that, right? By stuff caused by Americans, right? The rebellion. They're jamming Mexico with that, and then they're saying, "Oh, you're not going to accept him? Oh, we're going to go to war because of that." Well, they set it up so they do reject him. They had to reject him. Plus, the Mexican government was bankrupt. I taught you that. Plus, the Mexican government was under threat of overthrow from within. If they accepted Slidell, right? If they deal with the Americans, and the Americans knew both of that. Both of those were reported to the Polk administration, right? They knew that they sent him down there to be rejected, and they knew that the Mexicans were in a corner and had to reject him. And at the same time, they're saying, "Hey, we got to go to war because they rejected him." Well, they set it up so it's a fait accompli. That's an old school classic method of starting a war. All right. And then, so we took the Southwest Territory. With this war, we took all this territory. California, Nevada, part of Wyoming, part of Colorado, all of Utah, I think part of Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, yeah. All this, we took that from, right? So, about a third, or maybe even more than a third, not roughly about a third of our country, yeah, that's a big chunk, was taken from Mexico here in that war, right? Okay, so what am I saying? It's an expansionist war. All this stuff is expansion. All the wars against Indians. We made the Louisiana Purchase from France, right? Well, they wrestled this out of away from Spain, right? What right did France have to it? And then what right did Spain have to it before them? All right. And who lived there? The Indians. So we take it. We want to occupy it. We got to go kill the Indians, which we did, right? And then they had to run off, and they had to fight with other Indians, and then we killed more of them, and then they keep pushing them west. And where are they going to go after we get them over here? Well, they got to go on reservations, right? Wounded Knee where was it? South Dakota here. All right. All right. Okay. Gold Paulus area. Okay, where are we at here? Okay. So Civil War, 61, 65. The Civil War eliminated Southern political opposition to unbridled Western expansion. The Civil War started in 61. What did the U.S. Congress do? Did the Congress move to free the slaves? No. Hell, the first thing they did was their economic agenda, right? That's what they rushed to do. They passed the moral tariff. They passed land grants. Homestead Act, right? They passed the moral act, right? They created a national bank, right? They had the National Currency Act. Was they established the greenback. They had the Pacific Railroad Act, right? All these things they did was a concerted program for Western expansion. Why? That was the moneymaker. That's a moneymaker going into the war, right? That was a moneymaker for the next 30 years after the war. That's what drove our economy. You know, if people say, no, it was automobiles and it was oil and it was, man, it was electricity. No, all that, a lot of people cite the late 19th century as the second industrial revolution, right? Well, first of all, that's a very simplistic way of looking at the industrial revolution, which I reject, right? It's too simplistic. Plus, none of that panned out until well into the 20th century. None of those became viable markets, right? Even until after World War II, all right? Um, in some of those cases. All right, so let's see here. The Civil War eliminated Southern political opposition to unbridled Western expansion, and as a result, half of the U.S. land settled between 1865 and 90, right? And 5 transcontinental railroads were built. So the idea is this: here's 1607, Jamestown, right? Up until 1865, what is that? 250 years, right? You had about half the U.S. territory settled, right? Roughly around here. I think Minnesota was admitted, Kansas was, and Texas was, all right, by the Civil War, right? You also had California, Oregon, but all this territory here wasn't, right? All this was settled, you know, between 1865. So about roughly half of our continent was settled in 25 years. It took 250 years to go the first half, 250 years this way, 25 years remaining. And that was because Western expansion was unleashed with the Civil War, right? The political opposition from the South for Western expansion, the political opposition for statehood by the South, you know, um, yeah, it's cleared out. South, you succeed, okay, you got no say in the government now. We'll do whatever we want. That's what the North did. So the North didn't want to fight the war, but it was like, man, it was a benefit here. Requiring clearing. So all this rapid settlement required clearing the Indians. All right. That's just the way it was. You do not expand into this land unless you settle, unless you produce on the land. Right. You can't produce on the land unless you got a way to get it to market. That requires the transcontinental railroads. So the railroads and land resource development went hand in hand. They had to go together because they supported each other. Right. You cannot produce on land unless you have a way of getting it to market. That's the railroads. You cannot build the railroads unless you got freight to carry to keep in business. That's why they went hand in hand. You cannot do both of those if the Indians live there. If you allow the Indians to stay there, because they're gonna kill settlers and so forth. So you got to clear them out. So the highest rate of Indian wars was after the Civil War. They just whacked the Indians, get them out there fast, right? And then at the same time, where else are they going to go? With all this, you got 1/4 dying along the way here. From the Trail of Tears, all this, you have all the hardship moving. Well, they got somewhere to go, right? All the Sioux tribes from Minnesota, well, they're going out here to Great Plains and they're fighting with the Crow and whoever, for land here. I don't know who else was out there. Was it Utes or I forget here. Crow were big enemies of the Sioux, I know, right? They're fighting each other because the Sioux are moving in, right? Trying to dominate control. They're looking for land to live because they got their butts kicked out of Minnesota, all right? Okay. All right. So yeah, we're whacking the Indians at a high rate. Okay. No, these are defensive wars. My ass are defensive wars. They're expansionist wars. God. 1898 Spanish American War. This is an expansionist war too. I'll teach you. I mean, you know, the average person will say, "Oh, the Spanish American War was fought because the Spain blew up the Maine," right? Oh, bullshit, right? Uh, and then, and then, totally in keeping with the Spanish American War, or for the same motivation, we fought this war to suppress the Philippine Rebellion. I think it went to uh, okay. It's a 15-year war, so I guess it goes 98. I don't know. All right, so the key reason why we fought the Spanish American War was the Philippines, but it was for expansion into the Asian market, getting a foothold into the Asian market at a time where when our economy was crashed, and the only hope was seen as increasing export of manufactured goods to Asia, especially China, the Chinese market, at a time when the Europeans were scrambling to carve it up and into spheres of influence, locking the Americans out, right? Threaten our access to that market. So we got to get a foothold there and force our position there. 1898 to 1893 fought multiple banana wars, right? These were about U.S. control of foreign resources in other countries, especially in fruit, but other things as well. Uh, in agriculture. Why did the USA fight these wars? For resources, profit, and power, just like all the other wars throughout history. Don't give me this, oh, they're attacking us. My ass. Now, there could have been incidents here and there, right? But it didn't result in wars. The big wars were started because the U.S. started them. Don't give me, look up some facts, right? I'm going to get attacked here by people who don't know squat. Just watch, right? Just watch the big social reality waves. Oh, and then everyone's gonna say, "Well, you've got to be wrong because everyone's saying so." That that always works. Why don't you just look up some of these wars? God. All right. So, where are we at here? Let's see here. Banana Wars. Yeah. All right. And just keep in mind that this is just a short sample. Remember, the U.S. has fought 675 war years, 2.77 wars every damn year of our existence as a nation. So, based upon the real facts, the U.S. is undeniably an expansionist warmonger nation. You can only spin that in your mind if you know nothing, right? Oh, not in my opinion. What's your opinion based upon? Oh, I know all the history. Well, what wars? U.S. is always at war, started these wars in tricky, deceptive ways, which I've taught you. Now, how do Americans not know this? Well, flat out ignorance. What is ignorance? Lacking knowledge. You think Americans know facts about these wars? They don't know squat jack. Self delusion, believing what you want to believe, right? Because it makes you feel good. And social reality. Well, everyone's saying so, right? All the people are self serving, self deluding. They're all saying, oh, it's all bullshit. Why? Because we say so. And that's a final word. That's the ultimate evidence. It's because we all say so. What? All the know nothing lying retards? I'm sorry, they are retards. So all right. So here's the wars some wars I taught. I'll cover some of them. Right. How they started them in clever, tricky ways. All right. So let's go to that. I'm going to take a quick break here. Get something to drink. Okay, I'm back. So again, how will people you know, spin this to say, oh, it's not true, right? Unbelievable. Oh, they're all defensive wars. Oh, U.S. is always the victim. I don't know. Just extreme delusion, self-serving lying. Anyways, so I want to cover review of how U.S. starts these wars in clever, tricky ways, always manipulating Congress and the American public. Using the same old methods in a lot of cases, right? And so it works time and again, and history repeats itself. Therefore, right? Why does history repeat itself? Because people don't remember history. They don't retain history. They don't see it, right? All of these below examples are super truncated summaries. All right. Now, summaries are necessary because people don't remember the facts. They won't. Even after I get it, they'll forget them all again, right? Um, However, summaries don't contain the massive body of facts, and thus they are watered down versions, which threaten to minimize and trivialize the real facts. This is unfortunate, but it is unavoidable and absolutely necessary because people will not otherwise remember. And that is why history repeats itself. History repeats itself because people do not remember history, though they say they do and they think they do. And thus they fall for the same tricks forever. People will get they'll laugh and mock at me. Oh, you think I won't remember? But you know what? If I asked any single one of them to state a fact here, they'll be like, what? Right? But in their minds, I remember everything. I swear people think they remember everything when they remember nothing. So, Iraq invasion war, how the Bush administration manipulated Congress and the U.S. public into the Iraq invasion war. Right? And I'm not, again, I cannot show you the vast body of facts. This is just a summary introduction to give you an idea. That's all I can give you. I'm sorry. Right? But here's 9/11 of 2001. This is when Al Qaeda attacked the United States, not Iraq. Right? And P stands for the Bush administration's plan to use the Al Qaeda attack to get an attack upon Iraq. Well, how are they going to do that? Because Americans are dumbasses? Pretty much. They fell for it. All right, so, I mean, come on. Right? So, so, so on day one, both Rumsfeld and Wolfowitz, two scumbags who I hate, right? Those nasty, wicked bastards. All right? They're planning right away to use this attack by Al Qaeda. They know it's Al Qaeda. In fact, Richard Clark in his book, here's Richard Clark down here. I cut him off here. But in his book, he said, I got a sharp physical pain when I realized, I mean, it hurt him like physically inside. He realized that Wolfowitz and Rumsfeld are going to try to use this national tragedy to promote their agenda against Iraq. Right? They knew it's Al Qaeda. And then the very next day, Bush is pushing it. Right? Bush is telling Clark, link this up with Iraq. Right? Iraq, Saddam. All right, so that's the plan. They're planning this right away. And then these two are both involving General Wesley Clark, four-star general, Supreme Commander of NATO, American guy, U.S. Army, right? He's retired, but he goes back to the Pentagon after 9/11, 11 days after 9/11, and he sees a bunch of the key people. He sees guys like Cheney, Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz, all those guys, right? He's talking to them, right? And then he runs into a general who had been part of his staff when he was Supreme Commander of NATO. So his subordinate. And the general said to him, "Oh, sir, um, we're going to attack Iraq." And then Clark says, "Okay, why? Did they link Iraq to 9/11?" The general says, "No." Well, why are you going to? Why are we going to do it? And then the general says, "We don't know." Right. So then, 6 weeks after that, Clark goes back to the Pentagon, and he runs across the same general, and he says to him, "Hey, we still going to attack Iraq?" And then general says, "Oh, sir, it's worse than that." He pulls out a piece of paper. It's a memo directly from Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld. Right? We're going to attack and overthrow the nations of 7 Middle East countries in 5 years. Right? Right? And General Wesley Clark was taken aback. He's like, I couldn't believe this. Right? And I'm thinking, okay, General Wesley Clark is an intelligent guy, but he doesn't know U.S. history. This is the bread and butter of the United States. Well, we've been doing for over centuries, overthrowing governments, putting in dictators, controlling their resources. All right, so fear, F is jacking up fear. Here's a big fear campaign, right? And then R is push for a congressional resolution, all right? Now, how it's set up is this. You time this big fear campaign with the 1 year anniversary of 9/11. And what that does is all the fear with the anniversary and all this televised, um, all the fear and horror and terror of the 9/11 attacks are reactivated. And then, even though Al Qaeda did this, you dump it on Iraq. It's a bait and switch. You switch it onto Iraq, right? Now, was this accidental? Well, let me go through more. And then you had a big campaign to pump up fear every day. Every damn administration official, from Condoleezza Rice to Rumsfeld, Cheney, you know, Colin Powell, Bush was the main one. He made like 7 or 8 speeches. He made a whole bunch, right? I got that listed out, right? Anyways, in the midst of all this fear, it's fear, 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 fear. It's going to be 1,000 times worse than 9/11. He's going to destroy whole cities. He's going to have a nuclear weapon. He's going to whack an entire city with biological weapons, and you're all going to die, right? Fear, fear, fear. And then they bring out this resolution. Okay, this is what's going to keep us safe here, right? We need this resolution, right? Then then you have the congressional election here. Then you have the congressional recess here, which is the last 3 weeks to prepare for your election, to campaign, the critical crunch time, right? Then you put for the resolution right here, okay, right before they leave, right before the election. If you vote against this resolution amidst all this fear, and this is the thing that's going to keep us safe, man, you just committed political suicide. Not only are you some crazy, terrorist loving, you know, you're anti American, you're unpatriotic, you don't care about American lives, right? You're dog food, you're dead meat in front of your opponent going into this election. That created the leverage to vote for this sucker. And at the same time, they're saying, oh, this doesn't really mean anything, right? This is just authorizing the president to use military force. I mean, you have to be a simpleton to not know that authorizing the president to use military force is not full declaration of war, right? What is war? Authorization, the use of military force? I mean, come on, right? Who's dumb enough to fall for this? Only our national leaders? God. Was this done before? Yes. Vietnam, Spanish-American War? History repeats itself. Why? Because our leaders are dumbasses and don't learn from history. God, the same thing's done again. I told you, same methods are done again. All right. Now, was this an accident or was this planned? Well, what did the Bush administration say? They bragged about it. On 9/9 here. Oh, no, 9/7. 9/7, they bragged. All right. A Bush administration talked with the press, said, we're using a meticulously planned strategy to persuade the public, the Congress, and the allies of the need to confront the threat of Saddam Hussein. In the end, it'll be difficult for someone to vote against it. The Iraq resolution, the administration official said. Right? Did they make it difficult? Did they twist arms here? Yeah. Did they hold the election over their head like a battle axe, ready to chop down like a guillotine? Yeah. Right? They set it up. Did it make it difficult to vote against it? Yeah. Did they get it? Yeah. And as soon as they got that resolution, did they go to war? Well, yeah. Because as soon as they got this resolution, that's when the contracts started flying for log cap, Halliburton getting big contracts, right? They're preparing to take over Iraqi oil in November of 2002. The war started. They had this war all set up. They're doing this, right? So when did the war start? Was that March or April of 2003? Man, as soon as they got this resolution, they got their hot little ticket to war, and they're planning to go to war. right? They're building up. You think you built when they invaded Iraq in what, March or April? You think they just put the troops there overnight the night before? No, it takes months. It takes a good 4, 5, 6 months to build up. They're building up since the fall of 2002 to invade Iraq. They're building up in Kuwait. All right, and this is the hot little ticket to war resolution. It's euphemistic. Oh, it's just authorizing the president to use military force. Don't think anything about it. Don't worry about it. It's nothing. My ass. As soon as he got that, you got war. You could do everything you want in a war except a few things like uh, having to do with foreign nationals, arresting them, executing foreign nationals for espionage in our country. There's presidential powers to seize control of certain industries, to use them. But you know what? Those powers exist today, right? And those powers were available to Trump, if he wanted to use them for this pandemic of COVID-19, right? Um, what are those powers called? Something like emergency powers. I don't know. Um, you can hijack basically private industries for national use if it's a national security issue, right? All right. Gulf of Tonkin and the Vietnam War. Two games played here, multiple cognitive framework games, and get you again games. I'll teach you both of these. Hopefully, I'll teach you both of these as we go through this. All right, now in 1964, the Johnson administration wanted a congressional resolution to expand the war. So here's some statements from the June 10th meeting. This was in Honolulu, Hawaii, right? 64. Quote, this is a direct quote from this document, right? It's from Foreign Relations of the United States, printed in, Washington, D.C., U.S. government printing office, right down the street from the White House on Pennsylvania Avenue. Uh, Dr. McCone says that putting U.S. troops on the ground in Southeast Asia would require a congressional resolution. He reminded the group that the idea of a resolution arose when we were discussing how to deal with a communist reaction to our attack by us on North Vietnamese targets. So, what does that mean? It's kind of ass backwards, but what it means is we whack North Vietnamese targets with military strikes. When they react to our attack upon them, then we say, hey, they attacked us. And then we wave this resolution before Congress. Hey, sign this. This is going to keep us safe. When in fact, it's a hot little ticket to war, just like they did here. They got their ticket to war. So they created fear here. They created fear here. They attacked. We attacked them. So they reacted to it. Then we use our reaction to say, they attacked us. They're trying to expand communism. This is the start of a big, whatever, fear, fear, fear. We need this resolution. You think Americans were not suckers for that? Oh, hell yeah, they were. You know, people always think they're smarter than they are. Well, you can't fool me. And people are suckered by this stuff all the time. Same old stuff. They're suckered for social reality. They're going to be suckered for an attack by on this stuff. That's not real. That's conspiracy theory. I taught you all the details, and I can't teach it all again, right? But here, here's kind of the plan. So it starts here. Uh, I have TS, that stands for threat signals, and it starts on May 21st of 64. The actual big attacks occurred here, incidents, right? And then they got the congressional resolution on August 7th here, right? You got bombings in North Vietnam on August 5th, all right? But the plan for this really took shape starting in May. On this date, May 21st, there was a meeting of the National Security Council. Uh, and it's a top security people. It's a president, vice president, um, uh, Secretary of Defense, Director of the CIA, Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff, all the different uh, chief of staffs for each of the branches of the military, you know, Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, okay, uh, top guys, and National Security Advisor. And this is George Bundy. He was a key chief designer of this. Bones, man, one of the power elite douchebags. Um, okay, so he says in this meeting, hey, the Cuban Missile Crisis occurred because of the big movements of U.S. Forces in Southeast Asia, right? In Southeast U.S. I'm sorry, Southeast U.S. Right? And what they did is they put them onto these warships, amphibious landing craft, and they practiced landings in the summer of '62, right? Practicing invasion of Cuba, and big movement of forces, preparations to invade Cuba. Even though there were no green light authorization for it, but we're preparing, practicing war plans, existing war plans, right? And that signaled to the Soviets and to the Cubans of a potential invasion of Cuba. So they responded by putting missiles in Cuba as a deterrence. Now, that the way that was played to the American public is that's an offensive threat. They're going to whack, United States. They're getting offended. No, it was defensive, right? So we sent signals we're gonna invade. They got them to react just like this, and when they reacted, we portrayed it as aggression, right? So we sent threat signals here. We're shipping bombers, right? There were Canberra bombers, and Canberra bombers are jets. So this means American pilots because there were South Vietnamese, you know, even those U.S. pilots prior to our major involvement, and what was it called Farmgate, I believe, was the air operations prior to '64. I mean, prior to the Gulf of Tonkin incident, right? That was when he had advisors there, and there were still U.S. pilots. They were flying like what were they flying like trainer planes T-30. What were they now? Um, T-35s or something. I can't remember. Anyways, but they always had a Vietnamese. They called him a sandbag. He's just there to make it official, right? But it's American pilot, right? Now they're going with jets. That's definitely American pilots. They're bringing in jet bombers, and they have F-100s too, fighter bombers, jet fighter bombers. Okay, bringing in big shipments of weapons. Right, and the key thing here was he comes up with a 30-day plan. The 30-day plan is a whole list of timed threat signals. You do these actions, threaten them, threaten them, threaten them, right? And then you have D-Day, right? So the 30-day plan is D-Day, D-1, D-2, D-3 going back. Different stuff you do in each of these days, right? And you send threat signals. Uh, and the threat signals began mid-June. In fact, the very first threat signal on it was you sent a Canadian emissary to North Vietnam carrying a message of threatening of expanding the war, right? That was seaborne Canadian. So they sent him, right? And then they started sending all these, including Johnson. How I said, we're going to destroy all North Vietnam, right? But it's for peace, right? We're going to bomb them. We're going to invade them with maximum military force. What did he say? He said basically with uh, overwhelming military force. I think that's what he said. Yeah. We're going to whack North Vietnam, right? So all these threats, and then they're doing all sorts of stuff. They're changing command. The civilian ambassador to Vietnam is replaced by General Maxwell Taylor, who was the chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff and who set up the U.S. Advisor program, bringing U.S. forces into Vietnam for the first time, right? So they're like going to a military stance, just like Tojo replacing Kaneohe before World War II. Um, all right. So they're making all sorts of threats. We're going to attack you. We're going to attack you. We're going to attack you. And then more threats, and And then we start saying threats to America. So this is the multiple cognitive framework game. So we're setting up the North Vietnamese perception that they're all scared. We're going to attack you. We're going to attack. And then we start setting up the American perception. The communists are going to attack. The communists are going to attack. Right? Expect the communists attack now. Right? And then when you have an incident, they both see. You see, that's a multiple cognitive framework game. You establish the cognitive framework so that you expect to see things a certain way. And how do people see it? The way they expect to see it. That's a fundamental of drama theory. You never show, I wrote a novel, right? I know what I'm doing, right? You never show them something unless you prepare them in advance to see it the way you want them to see it. You set them up to see it. You give little hints. You lead them, right? And then when you see it, not only does it create anticipation, it creates fear, right? Dread, so forth, right? Right? It's basic drama theory. All right, and so the second wave of threats. Well, we actually start attacking North Vietnam. They're airdropping commandos doing sabotage missions into North Vietnam. So there's attacks in North Vietnam, and then on the 19th, you have the South Vietnamese leader Khan saying, "To the north, Block 10, right? We're going to march to the north, invade North Vietnam," right? Then you get Johnson backing him up. I think there's a D-10, D-3 in the plan. Said 7 days later, Johnson says, "Yeah, what he said is true. We're gonna back them up and invade North Vietnam." Right? That was part of the plan. They did it. And then Colonel Key said, openly blabbed and bragged about these, invasions. Hey, yeah, we're dropping these. I guarantee you, there's more coming, and it's going to be far worse. And he said all of North Vietnam will be destroyed, but especially Hanoi will be destroyed. That's what he said. Especially Hanoi will be destroyed. So he's sending these big threats, how they're going to attack into the north, right? So they're getting them all set up and fearing an attack from the north. Then we start attacks. I don't have a good map here. Let's see, Vietnam. Well, here's Vietnam. Let's see. So we start attacking islands right off North Vietnam, right? And then we have air attacks. We're bombing North Vietnam, two places. One near the Laos border, one down in southern North Vietnam, all right? So we had two boat attacks, two air attacks. Then we send a ship in, USS Maddox, on a totally different mission right next to where they attacked, these boat attacks, right? And so the commander is intercepting this radio traffic saying, "Oh crap, they're going to attack us," right? They're all pissed off. They're scared and pissed off saying, "This is more of the attacks going on." So they're going to attack this U.S. ship because they just got whacked, right? With boat attacks, air attacks. So they're going to attack this U.S. ship in there. So he has his translator. They're intercepting North Vietnamese radio communication, and he hightails out of there to the south. But he's ordered, "No, you go complete your mission. You go right past Hanoi." So he kind of zooms far away from Hanoi. They say, "No, you go back." So he's going directly back to Hanoi, and then that's when 3 torpedo boats out of Hanoi comes out, and they attack him. Right? He gets the hell out of there. They order him back in 5 hours later. 5 hours later, he's going back in with the Turner Droid. That's a Maddox and a Turner Droid, two U.S. ships. There's no attack, but out of fear, they expected an attack. And why? Well, they had another boat attack. When they're going, they have another boat attack, all right, while they're in this mission, jacking up the North Vietnamese again, but there wasn't a second attack. I guess the Vietnamese got wisened up. They said, "Oh man, they're trying to sucker us," right? It's a get you again game. We get you when you react to it. We get you again. With the get you again is a big war. So the get you is we're going to attack you. We're going to attack you. Then we attack you. When they react to it, right? Oh, we get the big get you. We got a war. See how it works, right? This is something that's done by the CIA all the time. This is classic bread and butter stuff, right? You think Americans are going to follow it? You think if this is done again, Americans will see it? Hell no. They'll fall for it, I swear. They're going to get mad and say, "No, I'm smart. I won't fall for it." They will never see this coming. They'll never see it, and they'll fall for it just like it's designed. It'll be fed to them. They'll believe it just the way it's fed to them. I swear that's what's going to happen. Why do I know this? Well, only like thousands and thousands of examples of it happen exactly that way. Do the Americans remember that? Do people? No, they don't remember one case. Nothing sticks. It's all out of their heads. But they think they remember everything. All right, so that's what happened. So there was no second attack, but they believe there's a second attack, and based upon repeated attacks, this is what Johnson said. Based upon repeated attacks in international waters, totally unprovoked. That's what he said. Bullshit. This was totally provoked with a planned threat pattern, planned attacks, right? Get them to react, just like this is exactly what McCone said. He reminded the group that the idea of a resolution arose when we were discussing how to deal with a communist reaction to an attack by us on North Vietnamese targets. Did we do that? Yeah. We threatened them, built them up, right? Had attacks here. Then we had big attacks. When they reacted to those attacks, then we used the reaction to get a resolution. So we bombed them here on the 5th, and we got a resolution on the 7th. And guess what? Nearly 100% of senators and congressmen voted for it. 100% of congressmen voted for it. How often does that happen? I mean, I don't know. I don't keep track of all congressional legislation, but I'm willing to bet it's like probably one of the only times you get 100% voting for it. Only 2 senators voted against it. That means that out of all our senators and congressmen, only 2 of them did not have their head shoved so far up their ass that they could see out their throat. I'm serious, right? And then one of them was Morris. Who was he? Senator Morris was a senator from, where was he from now? Again, I can't remember. He was a political science professor though at one of the universities, state universities. Senator Morris. Wayne Morris. There it is. Morris. Where's he from? Oh, Wisconsin. Was he from Wisconsin? Oh, no, Oregon. Senator Oregon. Okay. What's he got? Wisconsin here. Born in Wisconsin. Okay. All right. So he's a senator from Oregon. I mean, he's a political science professor, right? Probably kind of savvy, right? You know what he said? He said this is a predated declaration of war. This resolution. He's like the only one that didn't have his head up his ass, right? And he said that this is going to get us in a long, involved engagement in southern Vietnam where a lot of American boys are going to get killed. He was right in both accounts. As soon as they got this was their hot little ticket to war, right? Oh, that's all they need. Congress to buy off of this. The suckers, right? Our American congressmen. You know what? These guys are our national leaders. You wonder why, right? All right. So, did they play a multiple cognitive framework game, right? Creating two expectations of perception, which you see it the way you're prepared to see it. Yeah, right. Did they use a get you again game? Yeah. Remember, we're gonna get you. We're gonna get you, and then we get you, right? You react to it. Oh, we got you again. The big get you is when they get to war. It's like me. The CIA has played literally thousands of get you games, all of them to destroy credibility, right? They get me in some way. They get my car. They get my home, right? They play games with toxic mold, and if I say something, react to it, they record it and they pass it everywhere. He's a vicious false accuser. He's a liar. He's crazy. He's paranoid. He believes in Area 51, right? Don't believe. You see what they do? And the whole purpose is ad hominem, attack credibility. Why is that important? Because people won't remember the facts. They won't remember squat jack for facts. But if they know they can't believe you, well, they're just going to dismiss you. He's bullshit. He's a liar. He's a false accuser. They're all mad at you, right? And they think you're a liar. You think they're going to believe you? Right? It works every time. right? The masses always fall for social reality. What's social reality based upon? Nothing. They don't retain the facts. And they'll say, "What? No, I remember everything. What are you talking about?" You ask them, they'll remember nothing. All right, so I want to talk about Pearl Harbor next. How FDR totally set up the Japanese for this. Right? They cooked this up. All right, and all people say, "Oh, unbelievable, unbelievable." I taught you this before. All right. Um, again, I'm only, this is just a bare bones summary. I can't give you all the details. All right. Uh, and I'll start with this. Remember, I said that FDR is my favorite president of all time. I just totally respect the guy. The dude was brilliant, right? Commander in chief. What greater commander in chief did we ever have in the U.S. history? What guy do we have who better understood strategy, right? I mean, FDR was uncanny smart, um, and that's one thing. But the most important thing is, I believe he had a good heart, right? And another thing is, they understood what they're dealing with, the serious threat that was going on here, right? That was posed not by Japan. Japan had limited capacity. Germany was a real big threat, and they had to get into this war. Germany could have been a serious problem, and was on the edge of attaining it, right? If it weren't for the United States getting involved in this war, they would have had it. They would have taken Russia, Soviet Union, all the resources, right? They would have had all of Europe. Oh man, they could have caused big problems, right? They would have had the Middle East oil. Um, that would have been bad, right? They would have been a serious strategic threat then. All right. Okay, so here's Pearl Harbor, right? And I say that I start with the conclusion. The FDR administration not only knew the attack was coming, they in fact maneuvered Japan into attacking and then opened the way for a successful attack. Right? Sounds crazy. They knew it was coming, but they in fact maneuvered Japan into attacking, and then they opened a door so that Japan can successfully attack us. Right? Sounds bad, but I'm telling you what, I believe it was absolutely necessary. Why? Because the damn American public was like, oh, 90% against war. Was it 90%? Like 80%. It was high, right? In January of 1941, it was like a real high number. Americans against entering the war when we had to fight this war. Okay, this is our good war, you know. I mean, you can say Revolutionary War is definitely justified, right? I mean, uh, War of 1812 is kind of justified because Britain is screwing us in the Northwest Territory. They're reneging, right? But you know what? You know that U.S. ambitions were involved there, getting Britain out completely, and we're going to have, you know, uh, sole ownership of North America. Um, all right, okay, so I want to start here. Evidence of intent to go to war. Well, here's some evidence of intent that we want to go. FDR issued open shooting orders in September, before December 7th, right? So like, what is that? 2 months, November, October, 3 months, 3 months before December 7th. We got open shooting. He got open shooting order. Go ahead and fire on the Japanese and Germans, and there were engagements. I believe there were four engagements with German submarines in the Atlantic, right? Trying to provoke stuff with the Japanese, but they didn't sucker for it. Until they attacked us on September 7th, right? You had an economic blockade. What the fuck was that about? I can't remember now. Was that economic blockade against Japan, against Americas, including Mexico? I believe it was, right? Confessions, testimony. James, I can't remember what this is all about. All right, so let's go to they knew cutting off oil will cause war. So this goes back to October of 1939. Uh, so World War II started. in September of 1939 when Germany invaded Poland. Right after this, Gru flies back from Tokyo. He's ambassador to Japan, U.S. ambassador to Japan. He flies back, talks with FDR twice. In his diary, he says, in both of my conversations, I made it clear to FDR that if we go down the road of sanctions and if we cut off oil to Japan, and if they feel that their security requirements are not being met, they're going to go down and take the Dutch East Indies. And then Roosevelt said, well, then we'll jump them. Right? That's exactly what he said. We'll jump them on the way. Right? Uh, so he knows that we're going to have to do something Japan's going to have to do something if we cut off oil. Right? And then we're going to do something after that. Now, May 31st, okay, so early May, what was it, like May 6th, I believe, or May 3rd? May 3rd or May 6th, we leaked that we're going to cut off oil. Then on May 26th, we leak it again, right? Japan responds, it's reported in the papers on May 31st. Japan warns, right? There will be war. You cut off oil, there will be war. Not there might be war. There's a chance there will be war. They said there will be war. You cut off oil, right? Now, how do you get more clear than that? And then June 23rd, Ickes writes to FDR in a letter. He says, all right, now we know our way into this war. It's by cutting off oil to Japan. And he says this is almost word for word, which will not only make it possible, but easy for us to get into this war in an effective way. What does that mean? That means they want to get into the war too. They know that they'll get into the war by cutting off oil to Japan, right? And then Admiral Turner, who was the number 3 man in the Navy, chief of war plans, he is tasked to do a study on what will happen if we cut off oil to Japan. He reports on July 17th that if we cut off oil to Japan, we're going to be at war with Japan. We're going to go to war with Japan. They're going to take Thailand, Malaysia, Philippines, which is ours, right, and the Dutch East Indies, and we're going to go to war with Japan, right? Then on July 17th, FDR's statement, this is in the Morgenthau diary, he was Secretary of Treasury. He quotes FDR saying that FDR said that basically this: if we cut off oil to Japan, they're gonna go down to the Dutch East Indies, and we're gonna go to war with Japan, right? And Roosevelt also knows, in the testimony of Admiral Richardson, I believe it was his July 8th meeting with FDR, July 8th. So up here, FDR said, you know what? If Japan takes the Kra Peninsula, that's Malaysia, right? If they take Thailand, if they take the Dutch, even if they take the Philippines, right? We won't likely go to war with Japan, right? All right. But sooner or later they're going to make this mistake, right? They're going to hit closer to home, and then we're going to go to war, right? So by saying those out, by saying those 4 points, that's what Admiral Turner said. Admiral Turner said the same thing. They're going to take Thailand, Malaysia, Philippines. Dutch. He knows. FDR knows the strategic situation, what Japan's going to have to do to get oil if we cut it off to them. He knows exactly what's going on. And then there's 29 messages intercepted from Japan, which they're panicked over oil. I mean, they're panicked. They're worried about losing oil. And there's 5 messages intercepted from Japan, in which they fear war with the U.S. if oil is cut off. So we know they're thinking they got to go to war with us if they cut off oil. We know from up here, they said there will be oil, right? And then on July 25th, the USA, UK, and Dutch all cut off oil on the same day. Now, do you think that was just random accident? Hell no, that's coordinated, right? They all did this intentionally. This is jamming them with severe threat. Now, this is cutting their throat. Literally, this is cutting their jugular economically. They're bleeding out. They got 6 months oil, as reported in U.S. papers, and it was in documents captured after the war. Japan's war plans were, we got 6 months oil reserves, right? That's reasonable. U.S. has what, 90 days. When was that established? That wasn't established until the oil crisis, like 73. I think reserves were established by Nixon, I believe. the national emergency oil reserves, right? Uh, so we got 90 days. So it's totally reasonable. That's 6 months. We got 3 months. They got 6 months, right? I mean, you don't keep that much oil for your whole military and economy to operate in tanks, right? And they went to merge right after this. They went to emergency oil conservation measures, right? No gasoline for buses or cars, right? Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Yeah, you take the train or you walk, right? Uh, Restricted gasoline for ambassador vehicles, right? Ration. So then there's seven panic messages. Right after this, there's seven panic messages citing November 25th as the absolute deadline, right? You got to get oil back by November 25th, or things are automatically going to happen. And they knew that meant war, right? 8 ways we knew we cut off oil. So, I mean, we knew from every way, inside and out, upside and down, sideways, left and right, we knew that we cut off oil, they're going to war, right? And then we cut off oil. Then you had the testimony of Admiral Richardson, who said that he met with FDR repeatedly. I know in July of 1940, and then in October 1940 again, right? I think he met him 3 times, I believe. But I know definitely in July and October he met him, FDR, and he said he walked with FDA wants war. He's looking for Japan to make a mistake, an overt act of war. He's trying to do something to make an overt mistake. And then Admiral Richardson and Admiral Stark. Admiral Richardson was the commander of the fleet, the top naval officer out in the fleet, very top. And then Stark's at the very top of the Navy. He's chief of naval operations, the top Navy guy, right? They both said FDR wants to sink a U.S. He wants to get the Japanese to sink a U.S. ship to get us into this war, right? And in fact, Stark wrote a letter, and all this stuff is in official government documents. It's in the Pearl Harbor Papers. There's 39 volumes of this, right? You have access to all this, right? If you want to be an honest researcher, right, which a lot of people aren't. Most historians, when it comes to stuff like this, are just liars who leave all this crap out, right? FDR is willing to sacrifice U.S. ships, right? So Stark says, hey, as per, remember our last meeting, right? They just had this meeting, right? He's no fool. He knows fully what FDR says, but he's getting it down on paper. He's covering his ass, right? He's saying, as I understand it, you're willing to sacrifice 1 or 2 of our cruisers. We're going to send our cruisers out there in these threatening missions, right? That was part of this plan here. One of the 8 items to provoke Japan into attacking us to get a war. We have a provocation plan. 8 action items. One of them was sending out these cruisers, a bunch of cruisers. USS Chicago was one of them, and because I'm from Chicago, I remember that. Um, and he says, I breathe. Frankly, I breathed a great sigh of relief. That's almost word for word he said. Because I was worried about 5 or 6 sinking. You're willing to, right? But I breathed a great sigh of relief that you don't want 5 or 6 to sink, just 1 or 2, right? So why did Stark send that letter, right? You think he's stupid? You think he misunderstood FDR in this meeting? My ass, he did, right? He sent that letter because now he's got a document on paper that if those ships are sunk, he is not scapegoated for it. He's not going down for it, right? Just like Admiral Kimmel went down for the Pearl Harbor attack, he's not going down for these ships being sunk. He's got it on paper, right? If FDR makes a move against him to scapegoat him, he's going to pull that out and wave it in his face. That's his get out of jail free, right there. Provocation plan. So we wrote a provocation plan. 8 things you do to get Japan to attack us. We did 7 of them. We could have done the 8th, but I couldn't find evidence. We did 7 of these, and it didn't work. Right? Nothing worked until we cut off oil. That pushed Japan to the brink. So we're trying to get war with Japan. Why? because we go to war. We got they got the tripartite treaty. They go to war with Japan, then we go to war with Germany, which is the key objective, which is something we needed to do. All right. I mean, you know, Germany was the real threat. Intelligence warning Japan planned to attack Pearl Harbor. So, Ambassador Groot, this guy who warned FDR in October of 1939, he warns Washington State Department that he has solid evidence from multiple sources, one of which is Japanese, that Japan is planning to attack Pearl Harbor. It's coming up, right? Then this was discredited by the guy who wrote this plan. This provocation plan was written by Commander McCulloch. He was intelligence officer. I forget the guy who was in chief of intelligence. The chief of intelligence in January 41 was made the commander of the battleship fleet out there. You know the battleships that were sunk? So he was in on the attack. He knows what's coming, and then they make him commander of the battleships. I don't know. Whatever. You know, I don't know what to make of that. Maybe nothing, right? But he, the chief of intelligence, had access to all these intercepted Japanese messages. They know what's going on. They know what they're trying to do, provoke a war, right? Hell, the guy right under him, Commander McCulloch, right under him, writes a plan to provoke Japan to war, right? They know the plan is to try to provoke Japan to war, and he's made the commander of the battleships that got sunk at Pearl Harbor. You know, I don't know what to make of that. I can't say anything. Discredited by the guy who wrote the provocation. So Ambassador Groot says, "Hey, Japan's going to attack us at Pearl Harbor," right? McCulloch says, "Oh, disregard the Groot warning." That's exactly what he said. He says, "U.S. naval intelligence holds no credence in such rumors," right? Now he says, well, at the time, they had 9 of 24 intercepted Japanese messages targeting Pearl Harbor. 9 messages targeting Pearl Harbor. He says, don't worry about it. They're not going to attack Pearl Harbor. They got 9 messages targeting Pearl Harbor, right? 24 overall intercepted messages targeting Pearl Harbor. None of these were shared with Pearl Harbor, of course, right? Only a select few people had access to these messages, right? And then Admiral Halsey stated, testifies that, listen, if we had access to those messages, if we knew how they were planning to attack Pearl, there's no way we would have left Pearl Harbor. I was ordered away November 25th. November 25th, or actually November 26th. November 26th, they ordered us away. Send our ship away, the carriers away from Pearl Harbor. The deadline, after the deadline, when they know the attack is on. Right? He said, no, there's no way we would have left. And there's no way Kimmel would have sent me, he said, had we known these messages. Right? And then there's classic indications of war. These are old school. They're going to war if you get wind of these. So orders to destroy codes and code machines. There's 5 messages ordering the destruction of codes and Japanese codes and code machines. They're going to war because as soon as you go to war, they're going to try to capture that. You can't let them capture your codes or you're screwed. All right? Or code machines. And then they ordered the dependents out. Classic. In fact, that was part of the 30-day plan. Hey, order U.S. dependents. Why? Because that's going to jack up the North Vietnamese. We're going to do something. Well, they did the same thing, right? In fact, there were 2 messages. The first message is ordering the Japanese dependents out. Get your families out, right? Something's coming, right? And then the reply from Washington, the Japanese diplomats in Washington, hey, don't do this, because as soon as we do this, that's going to kill negotiations, because Americans are going to know we're getting ready to do something. There's no way we're going to get oil. We're done. You want to try to get oil so we don't attack? Well, you do this, right? We can't get oil back. They're not going to negotiate. Telephone code. So then they passed the telephone code. We intercepted this. Hey, we're gonna destroy codes, code machines. Well, before you do that, we'll pass you this message. So there's a telephone code It's called the winds code, right? What it is, if the winds are coming out from here, that means that negotiations over oil have been successful. If the winds are coming over here, that means negotiations failed. This would the message of this would go straight back to Admiral Yamamoto, right? The top Japanese Navy admiral, and he would call back the fleet that's going to attack Pearl Harbor. Here's a fleet. It left from an island up here, just north, right? Headed like due east, and then cut down here to attack Pearl Harbor. Anywhere along the way, if they got the message over open phone that negotiations have been successful, we got oil back, they're going to call them back, right? Right. The last thing they want to do is go to war with the greatest, industrial nation of all in the whole world of all history. No one's bigger and stronger than the United States. What you got? You think Yamamoto was an idiot, right? He knows that it's going to be bad. You go to war against U.S. And then they replaced the civilian Kanoe government with the Tojo government, right? Well, that's what they did in Vietnam. They replaced the Henry Cabot Lodge ambassadorship with General Maxwell Taylor, right? You're going to a military footing. And did it send the same signal in Vietnam? Yeah, right? How did the communist press respond? War clouds on the horizon. We're replacing the civilian, ambassador, the top leadership post with the top military man of the country. They're going to a war footing, just like they went to a war footing when they replaced Tojo. Right? Admiral Turner said they wouldn't have done this except we cut off oil. Right? He said we wouldn't have gone to war except we cut off oil. That's what Admiral Turner testified. Yeah, they wouldn't have attacked us unless we cut off oil. Right? They wouldn't have even replaced Kanoe with Tojo unless we cut off oil. That's what he said in his testimony. So now we know from these 7 messages that November 25th is the deadline. We know that they're panicked, right? Right? And then on November 25th, that rolls around. We now know the attack is on. So we now know that the entire Japanese fleet is on the attack. Both the Northern Fleet and Southern Fleet departed. In fact, the Southern Fleet was cited by G2 intelligence, G3 intelligence. What is Army intelligence? Anyways, G something. I get mixed up now. Army, G2 Army, and G2. Yeah, G2. All right. Okay. So Army intelligence has spotted the entire southern Japanese fleet carrying 5 Japanese divisions heading for the Philippines, right? And the entire northern fleet went total radio silent. Admiral Turner testified that 2 weeks prior to this, the northern fleet had really super high radio traffic indicating they're about ready to do something. Then they went total radio silent on the 25th, indicating to him that he said, we knew the whole fleet got underway. That told us the whole fleet got underway. And he said that there was 1 or 2 possibilities. They would attack Pearl Harbor or set up a blocking line in the Mandate Islands. Remember the islands that Japan acquired from Germany, right? They were mandated to Japan after Germany lost World War I, right? I already told you about that, all right? Did I tell you about that? Well, anyways, that's what happened. All right. But he said there's at least a 50-50 chance that they'll attack Pearl Harbor. Now, I'm thinking with 24 messages targeting Pearl Harbor, it's a little more than 50-50. So Turner says it's more than 50-50, at least 50-50, more, right? Well, I'm thinking like 60-40, maybe 70-30, but it's a high chance, right? You tell them at Pearl Harbor, you don't keep them in the dark, but they kept them in the dark. Now, once the FDR team knew the attack was underway, they took action to open Pearl Harbor to attack. One is on the 25th, the day they knew the attack is underway, they rerouted all shipping through the Straits of Torres. So now, after July 25th, there's no trade with Japan, but there's still ships going with Lend-Lease through the Japanese islands to Vladivostok, which is a little bay right in there, right? Right. They got to go through the Japanese islands. All right, and Japan complained about that, right? Because they knew that they're preparing to send this fleet out, maybe, right? Northern Fleet, right? They don't want it to be spotted, so they're bitching to America about these ships going through here, right? All right, and so what did they sent November 25th? You go down to the Straits of Torres. Where's Straits of Torres? You go any further south than here. You going between the South Pole and Australia. All right, they're no further south than that, right? So you're going down here, Straits of Torres, all right? You're going roundabout to get up here, right? They're clearing the path. That's the order. November 25th sent out. Ingersoll sent that out. Second in command behind Stark. Then Stark personally orders the carriers away. So the carriers were patrolling right about here. This is where the Japanese attacked from. They came across here, came kind of at an angle right down there. They're patrolling right here, northwest of the Hawaiian Islands, right where they expect the Japanese attack to come from. Why? Because you know that here's Midway. Midway is right about here, right? And it's a little bit higher. They got to avoid Midway, and these search planes out of Midway, so they're going to come around here, come down this way. Closest point of approach from Midway is 700 nautical miles. That's out of search plane range, right? That's why they went up here and cut down, right? So then they sent the ship. They sent Halsey, I believe, to Midway, and they sent the other carrier, which I believe was the Lexington. He had the Enterprise. The Enterprise went here to Wake Island, right? They're clearing them out. The key defensive asset protecting Pearl Harbor are the carriers. They're cleared out. They know the attack is underway, then they clear them out. Does this make sense to you? Right? They're setting this up to make sure they get this attack so that there's something shocking to motivate Americans. Now, is that strategic? That's absolutely strategic. Motivating the population in the war is a huge strategic move, right? It's one more thing that FDR did brilliant. I mean, I swear, if you list down all the things FDR did, it's like he didn't make a bad move, right? I mean, the guy was just uncanny, right? Anyways, Hull ultimatum. Then they sent this out. So this was no turning back, right? We're not negotiating with you anymore. They made demands that they knew Japan could not keep. You get out of Manchuria, you get out of Korea, you get out of China, you get out of Indonesia. You clear out. Japan, with the Great Depression, with the breakdown of trade after Smoot-Hawley and all that, trade wars going up, trade barriers, right? Japan was starving. They couldn't feed the people. They had to go out. You think they're going to give that up? Right? Japan, right, industrialized, but they depended upon trade. They were big net importers of food since 1900. Right? You brought trade. You make sure they got to go out and go get it. Right? That's what happened to both Germany and Japan. They got to go out and go get it. Right? That's why idiots who broke down trade were such morons. Right? Focus threat off Pearl Harbor. So they said, okay, hey, expect an attack at Wake, Guam, Philippines, Indochina, right? Expect the attacks there. All right. So now I want to talk about World War One. All right, we'll do a quick. All right, so does it make sense? How we set up World War II. Does it make sense how they set up the Iraq Invasion War? Right. I hope something stuck. Right. Does it make sense how they set up Vietnam? I hope something stuck. Right. Does it make sense how they set up World War II? Right. Made sure Japan had an attack, then opened a door for the attack. You think this is not opening the door for the attack, right? And they left the battleship there. Now Admiral Kimmel said that, hey, the reason why we left the battleship there is because they were dragging upon us, right? One, we didn't have enough refueling capacity to support the battleships coming with us, right? Plus two, they were slow. Those battleships were World War I battleships, built during or just after World War I. but with World War One technology. You know, they were fuel oil. You know, original fuel oil. When the original fuel oil ships, right, is old, efficient, inefficient fuel oil, but they were slow. They made between like 19 to 21 knots, right? That's a good 10, 12, maybe 13 knots slower than the carriers and the fast cruisers. They said they would have been a drag. They would have been a liability. They would have slowed us down, right? So we left them at Pearl Harbor, right? Who was in command of that? Well, the chief of intelligence who knew all about the us trying to induce attack upon. Anyways, I can't say anything about that, so I'm not going to say anything about that. What does that mean? I don't know. For 3 years, okay, so this is World War One. So the reason why Germany attacked us in was April of 1917 is because for 3 years we had massive weapons shipments to Britain and France. I mean, mountains of weapons. Over half of their munitions fired were made in USA, right? More, basically double of either country we made. So we had the big industrial machine, right? Um, well, at the same time, we claimed neutrality. You know, hey, we're neutral. Germany, you can't do anything about it because we're neutral, right? For 3 years, 1914, 1917, the USA supplied massive amounts of war materials to one side only, Britain and France, right? While claiming neutrality. Roughly half of all munitions fired by the British and French were made in USA. And they're killing German boys. You think the Germans like that? Never mind. Don't worry about it. All right? That's okay. Right? And then piling injury upon injury was the U.S. policy statement to Germany. Right? You cannot sink any U.S. ships carrying war materials to Britain and France because we are neutral. Right? You think the Germans really saw them as neutral? Hell no. Why did the Germans not attack U.S. ships? Well, they didn't want U.S. entering. Just like Japan didn't want, us to enter. Just like Germany didn't want us to enter war. World War II, Hitler chastised his submarine commanders. Remember I said there's 4 engagements with German submarines between U.S. ships, right? U.S. destroyers were fighting and getting sunk, and by they're fighting each other, right, in the Atlantic prior to December 7th, right? Hitler scolded his submarine commanders, "You idiots! This is what happened in World War One. This is how they got American, involved in World War One. You want that to happen again? The biggest industrial power of the world? That's going to spell, Anyways, so neither can you sink any British ship or French ship so long as one American's aboard. This was U.S. policy. We said you can't sink. Now, I don't think they abided by this because I think they continue sinking British ships, right? But they abided by not sinking U.S. ships. So Germany abided with the demand not to sink U.S. ships for 3 years, right? Until things got desperate by 1916, 1917. And then in April 1917, they made the fateful decision to start sinking U.S. ships, and they declared unrestricted submarine warfare against the United States, based upon the arguments below. So, I'm showing you that listen, we're doing things to get us into this war, right? You think our hands are clean? I mean, come on. And we want to support Britain and France, and this is my belief. We didn't want to support Britain and France. We wanted to fight against Germany because that was our bigger threat, right? The bigger competition was posed by Germany, right? Competition in Latin America, competition for Pacific. I told you there's competition for Pacific Islands, right? All right, so here's what the German arguments for unrestricted warfare, German arguments against unrestricted warfare. I'll go through the arguments for. All right, so you'll see that they had some reasonable arguments. They turned out not to be true here, right? A lot of them, right, came back and backfired on them, right? These guys are more right. The guy said, no, you don't want to go to war with the U.S. So first argument, they said, well, U.S., quote, neutrality was a joke. It's a farce. U.S. ain't neutral. Come on. They're selling mountains of weapons to the British and French, killing our boys, right? They said the U.S. was already at war with Germany, with the U.S. war industry operating at full capacity, manufacturing weapons and ammunition for the British and French. Half of the munitions fired on the Western Front were made in USA. And I told you that. Therefore, war with the U.S. would make little to no material difference since they're already at about full production capacity. That's what they estimated. On the other hand, it was believed that U.S. shipment of war materials was limited by shipping capacity, the amount of ships that they had shipping the stuff over to Europe, right? That was the weak link, the limiting factor. And this would not appreciably increase for a year. It takes time to build these ships after the U.S. entered the war. And it was expected to actually decrease with unrestricted warfare, the German submarines sinking these ships. So it didn't matter how many weapons they made, or you could get them to Europe by sinking these ships. That's what they figured, right? With the U.S. entry into the war, U.S. provision of war materials to the British and French would actually diminish as they diverted those materials to outfit their own armies. So the U.S. did not maintain large peacetime standing armies, right? So you go into war, you got to scramble and do massive recruiting, right? Take guys straight off the streets who know nothing, train them, send them through boot camp, train them, and then outfit them, right? That's going to eat up a lot of those weapons. Instead of going to the British and French, right? It's going to go to American units because they're going to have to fight, and they're not going to be ready for a year. That's what they figure. U.S. forces would not be effective for at least a year. So this is all they're thinking, right? Which seems reasonable, but America got things done faster. It would take time for the U.S. to establish, outfit, and train their army units. On the other hand, it was believed that an unrestricted submarine campaign could bring victory within 6 months. This is way too optimistic. It didn't work out. Hindsight is 2020, but the U.S., British, and French ability to finance the war production in the form of loans, credits, and bond issues was already strained to the max and would not appreciably increase with the war, right? This was the big era, right? It was no longer British and French bond issues financing the war. It was now U.S. government bonds. That cleared the way, right? You can pump out bonds as much as you want while you're at war. The German war effort on the Western Front had gone badly in 1916, right? And they were desperate. And unrestricted submarine warfare would provide material and psychological relief to the troops at the front. Now, while Germany was accused of conducting illegal submarine warfare, well, the British were doing the same, right? They were illegally evading inspection, which forced illegal submarine warfare, right? If you can't inspect, you got to sink those ships, right? I'm not going to explain all that with contraband and international law. I'm not going to explain all that. It'll take too long. Right? And they had a naval blockade against Germany, which was illegal back then. That was against international law. Starving Germany. So, the British were doing just as much illegal stuff. Right? England was seen as key to the Allied war effort, and maritime commerce was England's Achilles heel, which they believed they could cut off with a 6-month submarine campaign. Right? All right. So now, here are the arguments against it. So with the U.S. entry into the war, the Allied war effort will get a big morale boost, right? Greatly increasing their ability to sustain the war effort. Do people get tired of war? Are willing people to, throw in the towel, get a note? It's right? So with America coming in and saying, oh, thank goodness, it encouraged them, right? Conversely, German morale will take a devastating blow if the U.S. entered the war. And then U.S. entering the war might create dissension among the Central Powers, threatening the coalition, with some guys saying, hey, we didn't buy into this at the start, right? You got Austria-Hungary, Ottoman Empire, Bulgaria, Germany. That's the Central Power coalition. Germany starts unrestricted warfare. Then Austria, Ottoman Empire said, wait a minute. Why are you doing this? We didn't buy into this fighting U.S. We're checking out. Right? That's what I'm saying. That threatened their coalition. That's what they expected. Other neutral nations like Scandinavian states and Switzerland had indicated they might declare war on the Central Powers if the U.S. threw into war. Right? So, Switzerland, it's typically neutral. It's in that central area in Europe, right? The Scandinavian states, what's that? Norway, Sweden, Finland, maybe, right? Right next to Russia is Finland. Russia's on the Allied side. Uh, U.S. military forces will have more immediate impact in 1 year. You're saying it's going to take you. Well, they're going to be fighting us in less than a year, which is true. Quick victory through unrestricted submarine warfare was overly optimistic, right? That's pie in the sky stuff. 6 months, right? And they said that U.S. financing would greatly increase because now the federal government is going to be issuing war bonds, right? Right. This is going to save the war industry financing. Thus, war financing was no longer limited by devalued and risky British French bonds, right? Which are at risk of France and Britain losing the war, right? What would those bonds be worth if they lose the war, right? They would crash, right? And then our banking system, which is loaded on those bonds, would crash. And then we'd have a Great Depression, a big depression. While the U.S. forces may not be ready for at least a year, there will be an immediate spike in U.S. volunteers to British and French units, right? And the other thing was the sinking of the Lusitania. There's the Lusitania going down, right? I'm not going to say much about this. The sinking of the Lusitania was also a factor that motivated Americans toward war. This happened early. This was like 1915, I believe, like May or so, 1915. Americans were shocked and horrified that the Germans could do this monstrous brutality, killing innocent civilians, right? But you got to keep in mind, the Lusitania was carrying American-made munitions and other war materials, right? Using civilians as human shields. The Germans had requested the Wilson administration to issue a warning against Americans, and the Wilson administration refused to do so. We're not going to warn Americans, right? Um, the Germans are trying to set an example. You cannot use human shields. You're going to send these ships, these munitions on passenger ships, right? You got to expect that they're going to be sunk. The British made it impossible for Germans to inspect for contraband. All right, so no, I guess I'll say a little bit about this. Um, back in World War One, there was, according to international law, which was driven by mercantilists, the primacy of, commerce, right? That that you cannot sink ships unless you prove, if they're civilian ships, like merchant ships or passenger ships, you cannot sink them unless you first prove that there's contraband on board, contraband being like war materials, right? Not including food, not including medicines and stuff like that, right? Right. Uh, but there's got to be weapons, munitions, whatever. And then you got to let the passengers unload. Then you can sink the ship, right? That was kind of like the rules back then, right? But the submerged surprise attacks were illegal. That's what the British and Americans were saying. Yeah, it's illegal, right? Yeah, but British made it impossible to inspect because they ordered evasion. A passenger ship like this probably could go, I don't know, at least as fast or faster than a submarine. Submarines, the submarine can make 20 knots, right? On the surface, that was like maxing out on its speed, right? So evade it, run away from it, or ram it. Or they had Q ships, which were merchant ships that were fitted with cannons, hidden behind screens. And when the German submarine would pull up alongside to inspect, they would drop the screens and just blast holes in the subs. So they couldn't inspect, right? They had to sink it from afar, right? All this prevented inspection, right? So even the Lusitania was bullshit. It's carrying munitions, right? And the British prevented inspection. All right, I'm going to take a break. All right, I'm back. All right, so has there been a big social reality, a wave attack yet? Oh, it's bullshit. It's all unreal. All right, don't believe a word he says. All right, you get a big wave, and if everyone's saying, "Oh, that's real," that's what's true because everyone's saying it. I swear that works every time. I swear, people fall for that forever. All right, Spanish American War. Now, this is a war that, man, you cannot deny this. Why? Because we took acts of war first. All right. I'll go into this, but I'm gonna. I haven't taught you the Spanish-American War yet because I'm holding off on it. It is the most complex war to teach. It's going to require so many facts, and I tell you what, the masses will not retain any of the facts, right? It's a massive. I have no hope for them remembering the facts. And then it's going to be attacked. It's hard to teach because it's a massive amount of facts. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to talk about it, but I'm going to give you a quick summary. All right. I can't give you all the facts. This is all straight off the top of my head, and I wrote this in 2 hours. Right. I did one. What I combed through this once, but the first draft of this was wrote it in less than 2 hours, right off the top of my head. So we'll start here on February 15th, 1898. The USS Maine is like a battle cruiser, kind of in between. It was definitely a coastal ship. It wasn't an open ocean ship. Um, Not quite a battleship, not quite a dreadnought, right? It's kind of an in between, right? It mysteriously blew up in Havana Harbor, killing 260 U.S. sailors. Right? All right, big explosion. Right, all these bodies flying up in the air, big blast from within here. April 11th, McKinley asked Congress for authorization to use, quote, to use the military and naval forces of the United States, justifying this by, quote, this is his request, enormous losses to American trade and commerce in Cuba, caused irritation, annoyance, and disturbance among our citizens. All right, our prosperity there, right? Our money making there is being disrupted by this disturbance down there. The exercise of cruel, barbarous, and uncivilized practices of warfare shocked the sensibilities and offended the humane sympathies of our people. The key thing was the reconcentrado policy, which was Spain's method of anti-insurgency, counterinsurgency. All right, and the idea is this: it's real simple. It's the insurgents come from the people, right? It was guerrilla forces. Well, what you do is you gather them all together. You put them in these camps, surround them with barbed wire, right? And you better control them. Well, the problem with these camps is they had very poor sanitation. They didn't have sufficient food supplies. A lot of people died, right? Um, uh, Spanish mismanagement, Spanish lack of resources. McKinley also cited the destruction of the USS Maine by an exterior explosion. So he said an exterior explosion, that of a submarine mine, blew it up. Though he refused Spain's request for arbitration by an independent investigation. So Spain said, hey, wait a minute. You say this, but there should be an independent investigation because you could be making this crap up. Right? Right? Because you want a war with us. Now, there was never any proof that Spain blew up the USS Maine. No evidence that Spain blew it up. Nor was there any proof it was an exterior explosion. In fact, the two modern engineering analyses concluded that the Maine was destroyed by an interior explosion set off by a fire in a coal bunker adjacent to a 6-inch cannon ammunition magazine, which then exploded the adjacent 10-inch main cannon magazine. So that's a big. So here's what happened. This is a coal bunker. Carries coal. There, coal as fuel back then was more dangerous because coal. When you shovel coal, when you move coal, it kicks up coal dust in the air. When you get coal dust in the air, that creates an explosive fuel oxygen mixture. And there's been known to have been explosions in coal bunkers. And they believe a fire here set off an explosion that set off the 6-inch magazine here, and then that set off the main 10-inch round magazines right next to it, and this blew the ship apart here. So a study of the metal structural damage showed that it's an internal explosion blew it up. Both Admiral Rickover's analysis and Rickover, this is actually a picture from Rickover's analysis, right? And then he says, yeah, fire here, blew that up, which blew up that. Big explosion. Here's a 6-inch gun, here's a 10-inch gun. All right. All right. Then National Geographic sponsored their own engineering analysis. Both of them said interior explosion. But April 19th, so this is April 11th, he asked Congress. April 19th, Congress passed a resolution authorizing President McKinley to use military force against Spain. Right? What is that? That's carte blanche for war. Right? That's your hot little ticket to war right there. Then on April 20th, President McKinley signed the resolution and immediately sent a copy to Spain. Spain responded that the resolution was nothing less than a declaration of war, which it was, right? Which is true of congressional resolutions authorizing the use of military force. If anyone argues against this, I mean, I just want to slap him in the head. I mean, get real. What is war? I don't know. Use of military force. All right. April 21st, using the authority vested by the congressional resolution, President McKinley conducted several acts of war. First, he demanded that Spain exit Cuba or face U.S. military threat. I don't know if that's really an act of war. That's a threat, right? I mean, you could say it's an act of war, but I don't know. But this is definitely an act of war. Naval blockade of Cuba. Classic act of war. All right. I'm sorry. Then U.S. warships interdicted and seized 5 Spanish vessels on the high seas. April 22nd and 23rd. Classic act of war. McKinley mobilizes the nation for war, calling for 125,000 volunteers, soldiers. All right, getting ready for war. All right. Excuse me. All right. Then on April 23rd, only then did Spain declare war, given that a state of war already existed, given that the above U.S. acts of war were conducted, and there was a de facto declaration of war in the resolution. I mean, in reality, in fact, it's a declaration of war. So this is a quote from the Spanish Declaration of War. Here's Article 1. The state of war existing. So they're saying, you're waging war against us right here, right? Between the Spain and the United States, terminates a treaty of peace and friendship of the 27th October 1795, the protocol of the 12th January 1877, blah, 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 and all other agreements, compacts, and conventions that have been forced up to the present between the two countries. All right, so they're declaring war. They're not officially declaring war, but they're saying the treaty of peace is over, which is kind of a declaration of war. So we're saying they declared war, right? Now, can the U.S. say, "Oh, they declared war on us first"? Because the next day, on April 24th, well, on the 25th they declared war, but April 24th, before we declared war, Secretary of the Navy John Long orders Commodore Dewey to attack the Spanish fleet in Manila Bay, Philippines. This was a primary U.S. objective of the war. And then we fought a 15-year war to take control of the Philippines, employing brutal counterinsurgency methods that relied heavily upon torture. Right? I remember this from my history book in American history, seeing pictures of Army soldiers back then torturing these Filipinos, right? So this is nothing that should be surprising. April 25th, the U.S. then declares war in Spain and retroactively dates it April 21st. Well, that's when McKinley started taking the first multiple, acts of war, right? Blockading Cuba, then taking our ships. Act of war. So given the above series of actions, it is absolutely undeniable that the U.S. started the Spanish-American War with the congressional resolution that authorized McKinley to use force, which he immediately used to conduct multiple acts of war. Now, there's no denying this. I mean, if anyone says that's a lie, Spain start, I mean, God, you know, and if there's a big wave in social reality that says so, well, I mean, what can you do but slap him in the side of the head, say, "Shut up because you're stupid. You're just a liar." I mean, how do you deny this? You know, I'm going to get people attacking. You just watch. The real reason the U.S. started, and you know how they're going to attack. They're going to say at the end, it's all bullshit. No one's going to remember a single thing here. It's all bullshit. That's how they're going to attack, right? The way you win is you just stay ignorant. I don't remember that. I believe whatever I want to believe because I don't remember. Everyone's saying it. It's bullshit. So that's my proof right there. Yeah, all the idiots who know nothing themselves. The real reason the U.S. started this war is far more difficult to explain, right? Not because of lack of evidence, but because of there's too much evidence and information that the masses will not retain in their brains. I swear, they don't retain one thing. How are they going to retain this massive amount? Right? I got to explain all the economics surrounding this at the time. Oh, they're not going to retain it because they can't retain it all, or really a single tiny bit of it. They won't. They won't even bother. They won't believe it. They'll just believe whatever they want to believe, which is the simple, self-serving stuff that makes them feel good. Or they'll believe social reality, which is the simple, stupid, baseless stuff, devoid of facts and intelligent analysis, but yet ultimately powerful in their minds because in the minds of the masses. It dominates mass belief. You know, it's a social phenomenon. They believe it as truth because everyone's saying it. Not because of any real facts, any real evidence, any real proof, any real intelligence. It dominates. And I could teach this thousands of times, and it's not going to matter. They'll just fall for it again. So though it is easy to prove that the U.S. started the Spanish-American War, proving the real underlying U.S. motives is far more difficult because, one, people are self-serving and self-deluding liars who believe what they want to believe. Two, people don't care about truth. Their primary care is self, ego, and feeling good, right? Self-serving. People will not retain any facts. At best, they'll retain a single fact, which then they'll twist and distort to support whatever they want to believe, right? I mean, that's what people do. They jump on one thing they think will support, and if they can't find it, they'll make up something. I swear I've seen that so many times. I am limited here because I can only present a terse summary, which invariably will have to be watered down. All right. Nevertheless, I'll give you a watered down summary, a simple summary. So, of McKinley's three justifications for the congressional resolution, and thus for the war, two were entirely bogus, and only one was partially true. The USS Maine was not destroyed by an external explosion, but rather by an internal explosion. The real cause of the internal explosion is still undetermined. And I say this, there's three possibilities. One, it was an accident, like Admiral Rickover said. Two, Spain did it. Three, the U.S. did it to start a war for big picture, strategic, economic reasons. Okay? Now, I'm thinking of these three, Spain doing it is the least likely, right? Okay, it could have been an accident, right? But I'm saying, from my experience, from my knowledge of all these wars, how we start these wars, right? How we sacrifice U.S. people to get incidents to create wars, I would not doubt that we blew it up ourselves. Can I prove that? No. I cannot prove it. I cannot claim it, but I'm thinking, man, if I were to put money on it, right, that's where the U.S. blew it up, right? Because really, bigger picture things are going on here. That we started the war because Spain's cruel, barbarous, and uncivilized practice of war shocked the sensibilities and offended the humane sympathies is a sham. When we immediately turned around and did the very same thing for 15 years in the Philippine Islands, we did just as brutal as they did. We did the same reconcentration policy, right? So The key objective of this was trade with Asia, which was threatened by what was going on by European nations. I'll get into that, right? And to impose our will out there, we had to seize naval bases right out, best of which was the Philippines. To seize the Philippine Islands, not only did we conduct the very same reconcentrado program that we accused Spain of, we conducted a brutal counterinsurgency program with heavy use of torture. Right? You think the U.S. doesn't torture people, right? Man, we torture like crazy. Just look at the Bush administration during the whole Iraq thing, right? Right, during the whole war on terror, right? Authorizing all torture. Nothing is torture unless they die. That's what their policy said. Or their organs fail and then they die. Okay, then it's torture. But everyone gets off because you can't prove they did it intentionally. The only justification, man, they tortured me. 2 solid years, they tortured me brutally. 24/7, right? Broke me down bad, right? People that you're crazy. Man, you don't know what's going on here. The only justification which had some truth was the motive of the U.S. trade and commerce with Cuba. Okay, well, that's a motive. But that was nothing. That means economic benefit was a motive, but the real economic benefit was far bigger than that. In the big picture, it was about the whole U.S. economy and trade with both Asia and Latin America. That was what's going on. Cuba was small potatoes, right? There's bigger things going on here. Bigger things at threat. So what follows is a super truncated summary of my unique analysis of the Spanish-American War. I call it unique because, not much of it has been stated by historians, right? I mean, only the part where, there's a lot of historians that say, okay, it was the influence of Admiral Mahan's strategy. That's about as much as they give, right? Well, I'll talk about that in a little bit, right? But I go into the more economics behind this, right? So the USS Maine was not the... wait, I went over this already. Okay. It is unique because I've never seen a historian state the same thing, but most historians are simpletons that cannot integrate the vast information to see the big picture, to see what's really going on. Plus, they don't have the knowledge, right? Fait accompli, they're not... it's Mexican-American War, I've never seen a single historian talk about the fait accompli with Slidell, right? Why? I don't think they even understand the method of fait accompli then, right? To see what's really going on. They don't have the tools to understand what's going on. Thus, most historians are blind leading the blind. It is super truncated because the real body of facts is so immense, which will be impossible for the masses to retain, but also possible for me to present in a short summary. I can't present it all, right? And people aren't going to retain any of it anyways. All I can give you is a grossly oversimplified, watered-down summary, completely off the top of my head. But because I cannot present the massive body of facts, I'm opening myself up to lying attacks, especially since no other historian has said what I'm about to teach, right? There are several salient factors that drove the Spanish-American War. One was the current stage of the Industrial Revolution, which I say is pre-auto, pre-oil, pre-electric, chemistry, phones, household appliances, high-tech. Now, some of these were invented in the 19th century, right? But none of them became viable markets, of any significant degree. I mean, electricity was a little bit used for like street lights and so forth in the 19th century, right? But none of them became big markets until well into the 20th century. And some of them until after World War II. Phones, for example. Only 1 in 3 homes had a phone until like the late 1940s, right? Few people were driving cars. Few people owned a car. 50s were a big explosion of cars. And everything else, that whole area was, I call that the 5th stage of the Industrial Revolution, the whole commercial, mass consumer stuff here, buying household appliances, all that stuff, right? the whole building of suburban America, right? Outfitting them with refrigerators and vacuum cleaners and dishwashers and you know on and on and on, washing machines and um, um, so the economy back then was still dominated by expansion of resource production, railroad construction, and steel. All right. The state of the U.S. economy in 1890, well, it was a depression, severe depression between 1893 to 99, right? The widespread belief among U.S. politicians that the solution to the U.S. economic woes was overseas expansion of trade, especially in the export of manufactured goods to Asia, Latin America, for which they were prime markets, right? Europe being more an importer of U.S. agricultural goods, which are primary products. I'll explain why in a second here. All right. So this belief, I cannot show you all the massive amounts of politicians who all said that we got to get trade with Asia to pull us out of this. Right. I mean, it's a long, long list. I mean, hundreds of people. I got such a huge list of people, key politicians from all around. Right. All say we got to get, we got to get trade with Asia. Uh, and the Democrats were pushing trade with Latin America. The European threat to carve up China into exclusive spheres of influence, which threatened to block American access to that market at a time when it was desperately needed with our Great Depression there. This is the most severe depression other than the Great Depression. This was second. This was bad. U.S. ambition for economic expansion into Latin America and a rising European competition, especially from the recently formed nation of Germany. All right, so this is a factor in it. I'll explain this. Spain's utter decrepitude and thus vulnerability, creating a field for U.S. European competition, primarily with Germany. You know, uh, you know who's gonna come and swoop in like a vulture and clean up the Spanish stuff, right? Would Germany take it? Germany's pushing for expansion into the Pacific and so forth. Um, Germany was pushing for expansion of commerce into Latin America. Admiral Mahan's economic military strategy for overseas commercial expansion, especially into Asia. Now, this is pretty much all that historians talk about. They cite this, but they don't say much about this. I don't think they fully understand Mahan's economic strategy. They haven't read his book, no doubt, right? Um, I have. The current stage of the Industrial Revolution in 1898. So, in my analysis of the Industrial Revolution, I divided it into 7 stages, right? Most people don't do this sophisticated. I said textiles was first, ag machines, then steam engines, for both for factories and especially mechanized transportation, which was a huge quantum leap there. Steel and railroads was the next stage. Then electricity, chemistry, consumer products. Right, this is the fifth stage I'm talking about. Six was the uptick in the service sector. Right, the service sector was always growing, so ag was always coming down pretty steadily. Then you had manufacturing coming up, but you also had the service sector coming up, right? And by the 1950s, there was this distinct uptick. If you look at graphs on it, there was a jump in the service sector. So I say that's the sixth stage, right? When the service sector became the dominant U.S. sector of U.S. economy. Information high tech driven market creation, right? This is really what we're in now. Computers, information, internet, high tech stuff, all sorts of high tech things, right? That's driving new market creation. Because if you get new technology, you create new products. Create brand new products, you got brand new markets. You don't have to compete for old markets. You make new markets, right? That's the nature of our economy today. I believe that energy transformation will be the next big economic engine. So call this the eighth stage, right? But it's gonna continue in conjunction with this, right? It's gonna help facilitate as we transform energy. We're gonna go to cheaper energy, right? Get off. They people saying, oh, you know, Renewable energy is more expensive. That's the cheapest form of energy now, and it's only going to get cheaper. Why? Because it is driven by technological advancement, right? What did I show you? Um, I showed you up here. Oh, right here. Key price reduction factors. Well, market dynamics is one, economics, but increase in technology brings down prices, right? Improvement in production process brings down prices. Input costs going down. Improvements in supply chains bring down prices. Increased production volume brings down prices. All these are going to benefit what? Coal? Hell no. You're going to increase technology for coal? Improve production process for coal? Natural gas? Hell no. All this thing is going to benefit wind and solar and any other renewable, right? High tech based, right? And they're the cheapest as it is. Cheaper than natural gas. All right. The key limitation is storage capacity. But there's technology for that. There's work on that. Right? You know, I recently watched that debate between Harris and Pence. I tell you what, Pence is living in the Stone Age. He's like, oh yeah, the Democrats are going to push more expensive energy. You idiot! Coal's more expensive. Nothing more expensive than coal, than nuclear, except nuclear, right? Um, Coal's way up there. Um, yeah, we got to keep the fossil fuel, right? What's the cheapest? What's going to drive economic growth? New technologies. What's going to drive decreased costs in energy? All these things, technology, improved production, right? You're not going to do much to improve production process of gas turbine engines, right? Right. The greatest opportunity for improved technology and production process is going to be in the new stuff right now, right? You're going to iron out supply chains, right? Uh, all right. Anyway, so I mean, why is this guy? This guy's a national leader, right? I mean, this, he should be dragging a club and dragging a woman by the hair, right? Wearing his animal skins, cavemen. Um, he's a leader of a nation. Come on, right? I can't think worth crap. All right. Um, anyways, uh, where was I? Got off topic there. All right. So given the above series of actions, it is absolutely done. Oh, okay. Yeah. So that real reason. Okay. Oh yeah. Okay. We're talking about the stage of industrial revolution here. Where was I? Where was it? Um, okay. Here's the stage of industrial revolution. Okay. Right. So yeah, I believe that this, you know, you know how the dot coms in the '90s, the whole Al Gore, push thing, right? That was an economic engine for the '90s. Well, I knew I honestly believe that transformation of our entire energy infrastructure, right, is going to be an engine that drives our economy for at least a decade, maybe 2 decades. I swear, right? It's going to have a big benefit. It's going to bring down prices, right? Energy is a ubiquitous input cost, right? Everyone uses energy, right? And it's going to involve transportation too. Everyone uses transportation. You electrify transportation, get efficient, long distance, electrified trucking industry, for example, right? Man, that's going to bring down prices, right? That's going to allow for economic growth. That's going to be a hedge against inflation, right? These guys talking about, these guys are cavemen, right? You're old and senile. Pence, why don't you go sit in a rocking chair somewhere? What the hell? The popular simple analysis cites a second industrial revolution. So yeah, they talk about the second industrial revolution, which occurred in the latter third. You know, steel, for example. Steel was steel production got a quantum leap with the Bessemer process and then the open hearth process, right? The Bessemer process came first, and that was motivated by the Crimean War and the demand for larger caliber guns, which required steel for strength, right? So you had to have mass production of steel. Now, steel was produced in minute quantities before, right? You didn't have a mass production steel process until the Bessemer process. That was like Crimea War was at 1853 or so, right? So after that, they developed Bessemer, and then 1860s really steel started getting in the way. Siemens invented the open hearth process, which was more reliable, get better quality steel, more controlled steel quality, larger batches, right? But and then chemical industry was kind of getting underway a little bit, especially with the Germans. They got the Haber process, nitrogen fixation. When was that? Like 1890s or so, 80s, 90s. But they did not use that much, right? It wasn't really employed to World War One, large extent. Mostly not for fertilizers, mostly for munitions, right? That was a big use of, right, 20th century, World War One. You know, um, what else? Chemicals. They had Bayer aspirin and stuff like that. So it's trivial. It's minimal. The chemical industry didn't really get underway until World War II. I mean, other than that, you had some synthetic fabrics. A few of them, I forget the names of them, rayon, Dacron, I don't know, whatever. There's a couple of them, right? Nylon came right about World War II, right? But really, the boom in the synthetic chemistry industry came with World War II and thereafter, and it picked up steam thereafter, right? So that's well into the 20th century. Electricity, you had electricity early, but you barely had street lighting. You had a few super rich people with electrified homes early in the 19th century, not much, right? And then only a few factories in the early 20th century, right? Very few homes had electricity well into the 20th century. Automobiles, now, petroleum production went along with automobiles, and petroleum consumption, gasoline consumption, didn't really take off until after World War One. But even then, not too many people owned automobiles until after World War Two. Right? The 1950s was a big boom in auto ownership. That's when, all the became mass population. Everyone owns a car, right? A lot of people. And even telephones. Only 1 in 3 homes had telephones in World War II. It was after World War II, late 40s, were more at home, especially when you had the big housing boom with the suburbs. Building these new homes, and they're made with telephones, right? Right. So that allowed for expansion. But early on, only 1 in 3. You want to make a call, you go to your neighbor's house. The neighbor in the neighborhood who had a phone. Um, However, this is all this I say. So this is a gross. This whole second industrial revolution is a gross misconception. For while these industries were invented in the later 19th, 20th century, none of them became significant commercial markets until well into the 20th century. I mean, it's just basic economic history, right? People are going to attack. Watch. People know nothing. Who don't do no research. Unreal, unbelievable. I know a person who had a phone back then. Yeah, sure you do. Right. In some cases, the markets did not become substantial until World War II and after. Only steel developed early, but in 1898, steel was still almost exclusively used for railroads. Right? Carnegie Steel got big, right? Carnegie Steel was big on exporting steel. That's how they got big. They weren't just making steel for U.S. Right? They're the world steel maker, right? For example, the Trans-Siberian Railroad, that was all Carnegie steel, the Russian railroad. Use of steel in ships and skyscrapers only began right about 1890, right? The first U.S. ships that had steel hulls was the A, B, C, D class of cruisers, right? That was Atlanta, Baltimore, I believe, Chicago, and then Dolphin, right? I mean, I never got Dolphin. Why do you name 3 cities and then you have, why not Detroit or I don't know, Denver, or I don't know. You could have picked some city. Why Dolphin? You got Atlanta, Baltimore, Chicago, and then Dolphin. What the hell? Um, and that was like the first one was like 1888. And then like 1889, the first like Chicago skyscrapers had steel frames, right? And that's just barely scraping at the bottom, barely getting started, right? The big consumer of steel was trains and railroads still, right? That was huge because the most expensive operating cost for railroads at the time was replacement of rails, right? And steels made it possible to have longer lasting rails. Iron rails would wear out. You had high replacement rate. That was expensive, right? All right, and then barbed wire was used in the last quarter century, but that was peanuts compared to railroads. All right, 1898, the well-established industries included textiles, mechanized agricultural equipment. You had weapons, not for the U.S. U.S. wasn't a big standing army nation. Steam engines for factory power and for mechanized transportation. Trains and steamships. With limited production diversity, with this, I mean, these products were not, viable markets yet, right? So you had limited product diversity. There was limited market diversity, and so the U.S. economic growth was still dominated by Western expansion, railroad construction, resource development. This was still the main driving engine, right? That was the economic engine that drove the rise of the economic and political predominance. When I say political predominance, demographic and statehood, right? It was economic opportunity in the North. People coming in, flooding into the North because of the economic opportunity. And they didn't want slaves because they wanted their economic opportunity instead of it going to slaves and slave owners. Um, of the North over the South, leading up to the Civil War. So this was the engine. I mean, this developed early. This is Industrial Revolution stuff. This is the path, the separate path that the U.S. North versus the U.S. South took. All right, and this is what gave eventual economic dominance to the North that led to the Southern. It spelled doom for the South that necessitated that they secede, which then caused a civil war. Then it was the Civil War which removed Southern political opposition to the pro-Western expansion legislation that was all passed, right? As soon as the Southern political, states left, the North did not rush to free the slaves. They rushed to get their political agenda passed. It was all pro-Western expansion, and that unleashed unbridled Western expansion, which became the engine that drove the U.S. economy for the next 30 years, 1865 to the crash of 93, right? It was Western expansion, resource development. Mahan said that. He provided this economic analysis of Spain, decrepitude, right? But also U.S. economic analysis. He said, what's driving the U.S. economy is Western expansion and resource development. Well, duh. Everyone kind of knew that. And and here, some people today who want to say, oh, it was the marshmallow industry. I don't know what the hell they're going to say. Uh, all right, here's a quote. The remarkable activity in railroad construction during the period 1886 to 90 was mainly turned toward the sparsely settled regions of the South, Southwest, and Northwest. All right. Okay, so they're going into the South, Southwest, and Northwest USA, right? In this period here, that's what it's focusing on. This is right before the Depression. Here's the Depression. You see the railroad is falling off, right? In all cases, right? So these three depressions, I'll show you the depression. Depression of 1873, 1879 here, depression of 1882 to 85 here, depression of 1893 to 99 here, right? This shows railroad construction in mileage, right? This shows that each of these depressions were caused by a plummet in railroad construction, right? Each of these were part of the natural business cycle, and the business cycle, based upon whatever you want to say, the financing back then, rules for financing, rules for leveraging, you know, restriction of the commodity market, how you basically had only a few games in town. The big game in town was Western expansion of railroad construction. Money went there for investment. And then you get overinvestment. You have overcapitalization, right? And then you have over leverage. And then when you start producing more, then you expand more, and then when it's tapped out, you have overproduction. Let's say of whatever's being produced, the food, timber, whatever. Right? Prices fall. You can't sustain these farms and whatever business. They fall up, and then that collapses railroad revenues because they're not transporting goods. You get a depression, right? So you had big booms in railroad construction. Well, Civil War was small because everything's devoted toward the war effort, right? Soldiers were not, also, you devoted to the weapons industry. But after the war, all that Western expansion legislation allowed for a boom in construction, but it fell off, right? And the thing that triggered the 1873 depression was the fall of Jay Cook's bank, right, which fell because his railroad fell, the Northern Pacific Railroad, right, couldn't get financing. It was tapped out, ran into Indian country, all on and on and on, right, right. That took down the U.S. banking industry, and that never caused. This is a railroad depression. Then you had the economy recovered. You had rapid expansion of railroads. It's driving, going hand in hand with resource production, right? I told you how you have to have railroads and resource production going hand in hand as mutually symbiotic relationship here. Railroads cannot be built unless it carries freight, right? From resource production off the land, you got to utilize the land. You cannot utilize the land until you have railroads to transport goods to market, right? And you cannot do any of those until you kill the Indians and get them off. So this caused a big acceleration of Indian wars, right? And then so it's here railroads are falling off. Then you get the big crash. This is another railroad crash. And then you recover another big boom, right? Another railroad crash, boom, economic crash right here. Each of these were fueled by falls in railroad western expansion. Don't tell me this is not the economic engine, the fundamental economic engine. Don't tell me it was just purely financial. I mean, financial is part of it, right? But the financial aspect was driven by what was investment opportunities, few and far between, right? It wasn't a diverse economy, not like today. There's no high tech. There's no, all these products, all that stuff you buy at Walmart is very limited, right? The big money makers were developing our resources. All right. So the characteristics of Western expansion, railroad construction, resource development as an economic engine. One, you had limited market diversity. There's really one big game in town, right? All the rest were smaller games, right? Two, it's highly concentrated. Three, highly speculative. There was a lot of overinvestment, rife with over leveraging. Today, how banks have federal requirement to have 10% reserve requirement, right? Well, back then, I don't even know if they had a reserve requirement. Banks were leveraged to the hilt. Maybe they had 1 or 2%, in cash on hand, right? Bank goes under. There's a run on. Plus, there was no FDIC, right? You get a run on the bank, right? Banks are leveraged to other banks. That causes banks to go down in a chain of dominoes, right? Then your whole financial system crashes. Then no one's got money. No one's got capital to operate. No one's got capital to invest, right? So the economy crashes, right? Same things happen over and over again. It's like you didn't get this figured out, right? By the eve of the 1893 crash, let's see here. By the eve of the 1893 economic crash, the market was oversaturated with Indian wars complete, American dominance of the entire continent, and 5 transcontinental railroads spanning our country, along with many feeder lines tapping off of them, right? You had oversaturation, overinvestment at this point, right? Other factors, there's other factors, gold standard, deflation, the whole Baring Brothers bank crash, which, crashed European, especially London financial market, right? And how they started like dumping U.S. securities and so forth, and that causing a crash, right? Right. That's all like secondary. The main thing was the fundamental U.S. economic engine was in decline there. Then it crashed, right? The economic crash of 1893 resulted in our nation's second worst depression. I'm going to get all sorts of debates, right? Well, when you get something that's like complicated, they'll throw a debate in there, right? Make it debatable. Economic crash of 1893 resulted in our nation's second worst depression, which only ended with the Spanish-American War. And you know how wars pull us out of depressions. During this depression, numerous key politicians and also many military men like Admiral Mahan. Well, not too many military men, In fact, only Admiral Mahan I know was a military man he was saying the solution is you got to go expand overseas. Now, I can't show you all this, but I have lists of probably at least 100 politicians and newspapers and economics journals, right? Uh, trade journals, same thing. Man, we got to expand overseas. That's what's going to pull us out of this depression, right? Whole chorus of people saying this, and this was dominated by Republicans were saying this. Asia, focused on Asia. Democrats were focusing on expansion to Latin America. The two main markets for potential big expansion was Asia, favored by the Republicans, and Latin America, favored by the Democrats. I mean, you just look at this shift. There's clear shifts in different areas. Republicans, McKinley comes in, they're focusing on Asia. Cleveland's in before that, they're focusing on Latin America. Europe was the other big overseas market. However, Europe had its own industries in agriculture. While the Europeans primarily imported American agriculture products, that was highly dependent upon the quality of the European crops. Europeans had a good crop year, right? That killed American exports that hurt American. That was part of what hurt. That led to this. That was part of the factors. Some of the secondary factors was they had good European crops, right? Leading up to the 1893 crash, right? And so the Asian and Latin American markets were seen as very lucrative, high potential, because why? Latin American Asian, they did not have industrial development, which means they would be great export markets for U.S. manufactured goods. Maybe not as good for. I mean, they're going to probably buy some U.S. Agricultural products, right? But I'm sure they're making their own, right? But as far as manufactured goods, that was wide open for that, right? The only competition, for example, would be Japan. Japan industrialized early, right? And they became a major competitor for export of textile products into China and into the rest of Asia, right? But other than that, that was wide open for Western Europeans, right? And America as an export market. China was seen as a great market in Asia simply due to its immense population. I mean, in 1850, the population was 400 million Chinese, right? And based on that alone, Americans were drooling over the China market as a potential, gold mine. I mean, Seward was. Secretary of State Seward, he's saying our focus has got to be on China, getting access to that market. In 1894, and he did things to extend us in there, including Alaska, including he got Midway, I believe. What else? I can't remember now. Uh, uh, the 1894 Sino-Japanese War marked the rise of Japan. So let's see. China was seen as a great market in Asia simply due to this immense population. Now, this market was threatened in 1894 with the Sino-Japanese War, which marked the rise of Japan as an Asian power, not a European power, a local boy power, capable of competing with European imperial domination of Asia. So what were the Europeans doing? Dominating, colonizing, taking control of their economies, right? Of course, screwing them over, taking advantage of them, right? Well, Japan's going to do that now, right? Japan's going to copy what the Europeans are doing, right? And they had the advantage of short lines of communications. So, warning bells went off in the European nations, right? It's like ding, ding, ding. Oh, crap. They got advantage of short lines of communication. We got to try to conduct war, support it with lines of communication running from Europe, right? They got a distinct advantage. So this posed a significant threat to European powers, who then ganged up upon the Japanese with the triple intervention. That was Russia, Germany, France. They ganged up. and they forced Japan to give up all its gains in China, right? What did Japan gain? What was that Treaty of Shimonoseki, I believe? Was that it? The end of the Sino-Japanese War. Anyways, they got the Liaotong Peninsula. They got Formosa. They got a couple other islands around there. What else did they get? But anyways, they're forced to give everything up. And what happened? Well, the Europeans swooped in, especially Russia. They gobbled up all those gains. All right, right. So they moved in quickly, saying, "Oh crap, right? We better like consolidate our control of this with Japan there." So the Germans, British, French, and especially the Russians swooped in and gobbled up those gains, setting off an accelerated race to carve up China into exclusive spheres of influence. You know, this is like 1895 now. The war's over, right? So, and that posed a threat to U.S. market access, which U.S. politicians believed was desperately needed to climb out from the grueling economic depression. You know, Germany was in the Shantung Peninsula. Then Britain got a little piece of the Shantung Peninsula, right? So you know you're not going to get excluded. So they took the northeast, the little sector of Shantung, your Wei or whatever it's called. American access to Asian markets required possession of Pacific Ocean islands to serve as stations for coaling, rest, repair, and for naval bases for power projection. Now, our greatest competitor for Pacific Islands at that time was the newly formed German nation, who was scrambling to acquire a wide array of Pacific Islands from the east, from eastern New Guinea, Bismarck Islands, Mandate Islands, Carolinas, Marianas, Samoa, etc. They're gobbling up stuff, right? Germany as a nation did not exist until the Franco-Prussian War, so they're latecomers, right? Thus, Germany was a latecomer to the colonial race or slash competition. However, both Bismarck and Kaiser Wilhelm set the nation on a course of rapid naval and colonial expansion for which there was little left unclaimed. Right? So they're starting late, little left unclaimed. German pushed into Asia, Africa, and made strategic strides into the Middle East, you know, and also Pacific. Also, you're right, the Pacific Islands. Uh, Asia. All right, so they're making big, fast moves. Germany, right? However, I believe the key German threat to American aspirations was commercial expansion into Latin America. Right, like the Asian markets, Latin America lacked industrial development, and thus was a prime market for U.S. Manufactured goods. By 1821, all the Latin American countries from Mexico down to Argentina had gained independence from Spain, Portugal. Right. So remember, I told you there was a jailbreak. Napoleon invaded Spain in 1808, started the Peninsula War. All these Spanish colonies in America took advantage of that. You know, bases declared independence, had revolutions, right? Said we're free. 1810, and by 1821 they all pretty much got independence. That's when Mexico got independence. One of the last to get independence was Mexico, 1821. So they were all free, and then by 1823, well, the only remaining European colonial possessions were British Guyana, Dutch Suriname, and French Guyana. Now, I think French Guyana is down there. That's Dutch Suriname, and I believe that's British Guyana up there. I think that's how it goes, right? I know Suriname's in the middle. French, French and British are on either side. I think French are down there, British up there. Anyways, so um, that's all. Everything else is independent. So what did Monroe do? Monroe in 23 said, "Hey, Europeans, right? You stay out." So President Monroe issued a Monroe Doctrine to stake U.S. claim over Latin America as our sphere of influence. This is our backyard, right? So the Europeans still had that, but no more. You can't colonize any of this, right? And basically telling the Europeans to keep out, and for the most part, it worked, right? Now with the French Revolution, Napoleonic Wars, Britain replaced Spain as a dominant trading force in Latin America. So, you know, with that, the British moved in, right? That's what really saved British economics was the big growth in Latin America. It was one of the things, Latin American trade, right? They lost some continental access with Napoleon's continental system, but they didn't lose a step. They in fact grew with trade with Latin America. Um, so they became the dominant European power in Latin America. Let's see. However, American investment in Latin America began to grow at least as early as mid 19th century. I know we're building railroads. There's a lot of investment going on in Mexico and then going further down into Central America. You know, beginning in the mid 19th century, right? And by 1890s, the U.S. was flexing its muscles against Britain with several confrontation conflicts, contesting British dominance. What the Chile incident in '91, another incident with Brazil in '94. So we had troubles. We're fighting with Britain, Nicaragua in '94, Venezuela in '95, right? But now Germany's starting to move in. So Germany was formed in '71, but Germany was the upstart and the new big threat to U.S. dominance over Latin America. They weren't trying to colonize anything, right? They weren't violating the Monroe Doctrine. They're just making business deals, right? They're setting up shop and expanding commercially, which is the same thing, right? That's the main thing is commercial operations, right? So they want to control Latin America through their commercial operations. Um, so belatedly formed in 1871, Germany embarked upon colonial expansion at a time when there was little left unclaimed. All right, in Africa, they if this is Africa, roughly kind of like South America shape. Well, they had a little bit in the southeast, a little bit in the southwest, right? They're trying to move into the Middle East, all right? They're trying to take some Pacific islands. They're trying to move into China, especially around Shantung Peninsula, all right? And but now they're making a big move to go into Latin America. Let's see here. However, Latin America had been largely preserved from European colonial control by the Monroe Doctrine, which afforded Germans an opportunity for commercial expansion. So the Germans moved in aggressively, not colonially, but commercially, right? But still a threat to U.S. Domination of that. Uh, so both U.S. access to Asia and Latin American markets were being threatened, right, by Europeans. A war with Spain would do much to solve both of these threats, including giving the U.S. a dominant position in the Caribbean, dominant position in the Pacific, right? This strategy was outlined by Admiral Mahan, who had a number of key political proponents, including his close friends Teddy Roosevelt and Senator Henry Cabot Lodge Jr., both of whom were instrumental in starting the Spanish-American War, all right, and both of whom pushed hard for American overseas expansion, right? So this is part of this is the strategic thing laid out by Mahan. This is the political backing for it. This is the economic reasons why we needed it. Now Mahan laid out his strategy in his book, "The Influence of Sea Power Upon History." 1890 is published, right? It's a very well written book. It's very concise. You know, uh, elements of Mahan's strategy. The underlying strength of great empires begins with their commercial strength. That's what he said. For many centuries, the commercial strength of nations depended largely upon their control of seaborne communications routes. All right. Uh, America had been blessed with great land and resource opportunities for expansion and development, but this stultified both our merchant fleet and naval power projection. The vast land and resource opportunities American economic growth has driven by Western expansion and resource development. This was our engine, he's saying. Mahan acknowledged this, but said that there would come a day when America will need to expand overseas, especially into Asia, China, and this quickly became true. He published his book in 1890, and then boom, 1893, there's a crash, and they're dusting off Mahan saying we got to go overseas. So only 3 years away, and so Mahan was both prophetic and visionary, right? U.S. commercial expansion into Asia would require 4 naval bases to project power near the markets, the best being the Philippine Islands, right? Right. Look at the Philippines. Here, it's set. If this is Asia wrapping around an arc here, you see how Asia? There's Japan. This is Kamchatka. That's part of Russia up there, right? Here's a Sakhalin Islands way up there. That's debated, contested with Russia, right? Uh, Here's China, Indochina, Malaysia, Indonesia, Dutch East Indies, right? New Guinea, right? Here's Australia. All this wraps around the Philippines. It's the central hub. It's a key strategic island so you can project your naval power with this as a base all around here, right? A chain of islands stretching from America to Asia. He said you need service coaling station, and that's what we did. We took it with the Spanish-American War. We took Hawaii. We had Midway. We took Wake, Guam, Philippines, right? Coaling stations, repair stations, rest stations, right? Coal. Why coal was an inefficient fuel compared to naval fuel, right? So we took Samoa. Then he said we need a trans-isthmus canal to connect both the East Coast manufacturing and the Midwest bread belt with Asia. So here's East Coast manufacturing. Here's the Midwest bread belt coming down Mississippi to New Orleans, right? All this traffic going up here, right? All this traffic going to the Trans-Pacific Canal would require that we have Cuba to guard and protect it. If some foreign nation took that, who we went to war with, they could shut it down. Just think, they could shut down the whole mouth of the Gulf of Mexico, shut down all the communication. They could kill the Midwest economy here, right? Right. So Cuba was essential as a strategic base to dominate access, Western access to that Trans-Isthmus Canal. Then you need coaling stations all along the way. Then you need the Philippines to project power. Main naval base out here. I mean, that's what Mahan was saying, right? So, of course, the canal would also connect East Coast and West Coast markets, right? So not only all the stuff here coming out of here, all the stuff coming out of manufactured goods would be connected with California, much cheaper than trains, right? Water route was slower, but I tell you what, if time wasn't that critical, and you're talking about continuous flow, right, rates, right, it's 1/3 cheaper water than land, right? Trains were 3 times more expensive, land transportation. So I mean, this was important. This was huge. That's a big price advantage. Cuba was a key strategic island in the Caribbean, and it must be controlled because 1, it guards Western access to the Trans-Isthmus Canal, right here, all the way down here, right? 2, it guards the mouth of the Gulf of Mexico and thus secures communication between Midwest breadbasket here and East Coast manufacturing here, right? Plus anything coming out of here to the canal, right? Gives the U.S. a dominant base to project power in the Caribbean, right? We can dominate power here and control investments, our investments, influence our investment. It also brings U.S. forces closer to Latin America and could serve as a launching point if we had to conduct operations in, for example, Central or South America, right? And that's huge, right? If someone else controlled this, let's say Germany, France, or Britain, we got in a fight with them, war with them, right? They could block any operations, right? We wanted to go down here, all right? And Cuba would be synonymous with England. England was so vitally strategic as a jumping off pad into Europe. All right. So this would be a jumping off pad going into Latin America. All right. Spain was weak and decrepit. Spain was vulnerable. Spain was easy pickings for some nation to come along. Right. Why not us? Mahan provided an economic analysis to explain Spain's decrepitude, which, in all honesty, was somewhat rudimentary. But he was still right on. He was still largely correct, right? Spain was the linchpin for Mahan's strategy, and thus war with Spain was necessary. Why? To get all this stuff, you had to go with war with one fell swoop. You go to war with Spain, you get Cuba, you get Puerto Rico to guard the eastern access to the canal, right? Right. You could now protect that canal, right? You take Hawaii, we annexed Hawaii, but you take Guam and you take the Philippines. Those were key. Wake was kind of up for grabs. No one really claimed it, right? Midway was ours already. We annexed Hawaii in that year, right? We also then took Samoa, all right? So we're making our big moves into the Pacific with the Spanish-American War, all right? Now, you think this is all an accident? You think this is just random? This is all planned. This all follows my hands plan. And there's need for it with the Great Depression there, right? With the Spanish American War, man's plan was implemented. Right, U.S. took Cuba to guard the western access of the Trans-Isthmian Canal and the Gulf and the mouth of the Gulf of Mexico. U.S. took Puerto Rico to guard the eastern access to the Trans-Isthmian Canal. Right, U.S. annexed Hawaii and took Wake, Guam, Philippines. Right, Spanish. Right, the following year we took Samoa against German competition. These served as way stations for rest, repair, replenishing, and refueling. Philippines are an ideal base for naval power projection into Asia, since all of Asia wraps around the Philippines in a 600-mile arc. I showed you that whole arc there. I'm not showing you Australia, but all this Asia, including China, South Korea, Indochina, all wraps around the Philippines, right? That's just the prime strategic forward base there. Okay. How do you figure that out? Oh, I don't know. Buy a map. At first, the Filipinos welcomed the U.S. soldiers as liberators, but quickly realized that they came to conquer and were simply replacing the Spanish. Right? This set off a 15-year war in which U.S. forces employed brutal counterinsurgency methods to secure control of the Philippines. We were just as bad as the Spanish were in Cuba. Right? Don't tell me, oh, we got to go in there, right? Because of Spain's. And we did the same thing to the Philippines. We did the same thing to the Indians also. We conducted genocide in the Indians. Don't give me this bleeding heart crap, right? Uh, all right. So, Secretary of State Hay issued the open door policy demanding U.S. access to the China market. All right. That's another evidence, right? Then in 1902, 1903, the U.S. promoted the Panama Revolution and provided military support. We gave naval backing, right? But the key actions were actually performed by the American owners of the Panama Railroad, right? The Panama Railroad cut across the isthmus there, right, from roughly there to there, right? And that was a key transportation route prior to the canal, right? You had to send goods by water here, unload them, put them on a train, right? And then load them back on the boats and send them to California, whatever, back and forth that way, right? Kind of costly. The canal would make it a lot cheaper. You wouldn't have to do the offload and then onload again. Um, okay, and the key actions were conducted by this. What they did is they basically suckered the see Panama was part of Colombia, right? And they wanted to go independent, so we supported that. We provided the key action, which was a ruse that sent the Colombian general who was sent there to and his forces to suppress this revolution. Right? We sent him in an advanced train and with his army to follow, but we never sent his forces. So it separated him, and then he was captured, and then the whole thing was over. It was pretty bloodless, right? Uh, From this revolution, the U.S. acquired ownership of the Panama Canal Zone, right? So then we got our transits. It took years to build, cost a lot of lives, right? But we got the transits to come out and eventually built, right? Huge economic boom there. All right, summary. It is easy to show that the U.S. started the Spanish-American War. It's undeniable. If anyone wants to deny that, and I know people want to deny it, you're a flat-out lying son of a bitch. I swear, right? Undeniable, the U.S. started this war. It's harder to prove, in the minds of Americans, the real reason for the war, which was not the USS Maine explosion, the real reasons were bigger, massive, right? Bigger economic reasons. It requires a massive amount of facts, which the masses will retain literally zero of. All I taught here is going to be a blur, right? People are going to say, "What? You think I'm going to forget it all?" You're not. You're not going to remember immediately right after. You're not going to be able to state a single thing. How do I know this? Only from like 1,000 times testing this, right? What do you have in your mind as far as evidence? Zero. I know from 1,000 times, people aren't going to retain anything, right? And then in a day, it's all gone. I only presented a bare bones outline here with little facts, and therefore this statement is vulnerable to attack, and no one's going to remember anything anyways. So you're going to get a big social reality attack because no one's going to remember any facts. But my key point is that the U.S. started this war, which is, you cannot deny that. Like we started so many wars, and that cannot be denied. Unless you just remember nothing. Finally, I wrote all this straight off the top of my head within about 2 hours. Less than 2 hours I wrote this. Right? Now, I did clean this up today before I did this. I spent some time cleaning it up. But, the 99% of this, I wrote this in 2 hours. All right, so what do I got next here? U.S. Civil War. I'll cover this. I'm getting tired. I know you're getting tired. I'm probably not going to go through the Mexican-American War. Right? This is a summary of it. Right? U.S. started this war. There, uh, you know, I'm not going to. Let me go to U.S. Civil War. So I'm going to get a big attack. No one's going to remember a thing. No one's going to retain a thing. They're going to try to create a big social reality wave. Right? That's what they always do. Don't remember Jack. Create a wave. Everyone's saying, "Oh, bullshit." Right? So U.S. Civil War. Right? I prove this. The predominant belief among Americans is that the Civil War was fought to free the slaves. Right? People tell me one of two things. Right? Roughly half and half. Right? I've asked a lot of people. They say, "Why was the Civil War fought?" Well, a lot of people don't know why at all. I don't know, right? And then out of the people who know, half will say, "Oh, to free the slaves." The other half will say, "No, it wasn't to free the slaves. Those states' rights." But then if you ask these people who say states' right, well, what state right were they fighting over? Like, oh, I don't know. They just memorize some buzz term, right? The state right they're fighting over was slavery. That was the key thing that the southern states, when they seceded, they claimed, right? Oh, the North's going to free the slaves. The North's going to free the slaves, right? They weren't saying, "Oh, the North's going to raise taxes. The North's going to raise taxes. It's going to hurt the wealthy slave plantation owners and the merchants," right? They weren't saying that, right? The big thing was slaves. That was a big fear-mongering thing. Why? Because that would mobilize the population to fight for the South, right? That was a big fearmonger line they're telling, right? So the chief state right blab was fear-mongering slavery. The North is going to free the slaves. So states' right was really all about slavery. So so everyone who says either slavery or states' right are really talking about slavery, right? I proved that this was a total fairy tale myth. All right. Now I can't give you the full detailed, analysis. I've taught you the Civil War. And again, I doubt very many people remember any facts. 99.99999% remember zero. Honestly, zero. They're gonna say, "What are you talking about? I remember." You ask them, "What do you remember about the facts?" That they'll have nothing. But they'll laugh at it if I say you won't remember anything. They'll laugh at that. "What are you talking about? Oh, you think?" But in reality, they'll know nothing. So the predominant belief among Americans, so I proved that it was a totally fairy tale. After the clean sweep by the Republican Party in the 1860 election, they won total legislative power. They won the Senate, the House, the President. Southern states began to secede, claiming that the North was about to free the slaves when there was zero real threat to that. Zero. In fact, the now Northern Congress, I say Northern Congress because there was no Southern membership in Congress. They all seceded, bit by bit, not all at once, but bit by bit from November to by the beginning of the New Year, they're all out pretty much. Right? Uh, the North rushed to undercut this bogus excuse for seceding by passing the Corwin Amendment to the Constitution, which protected the institution of slavery forever. They didn't pass legislation trying to free them. They protected slavery forever with a constitutional amendment. Amended the Constitution. They were so desperate to avoid a war, they promised with an amendment to the Constitution that slavery would be protected forever. That's not trying to free the slaves. That's protecting and promoting slavery, not threatening it. What are you talking about? They're trying to free them. Now, the Northern Congress went even further to appease the South by offering the New Mexico Territory statehood as a slave state. That's not trying to eliminate slavery. That's promoting the expansion of slavery by the North, not threatening it. All right? What are you talking about? It's fought to free the slaves. They're not trying to free the slaves. And then the North made no move to end slavery before the war, for there was no bill in Congress. Thus, there was no threat to slavery. And even when the 13th Amendment passed in the 11th hour of the war, on January 31st of 1865, just a few months before the war ended, right? It only passed by 2 votes. It barely passed. And that's with Lincoln. That's only with northern states. No southern states. Only northern states barely wanted it, right? And Lincoln had to twist arms, and he was buying votes. He was promising lame duck congressmen who were voted out of office, hey, you're not gonna have a job here in a month or so, right? Tell you what, you vote for this, I'll give you a federal job. One of which, I remember, was the director of the naval base in New York Harbor. That's huge. You know how much graft there can be, how much money you can make off of that, right? Back then, right? That'd be huge, right? That's a big paycheck right there, right? Not only was it a federal paycheck, man, that was a lush, cush job there, right? I forget who he gave that to. But again, they're all northern politicians, right? With stuff like barely passed. What does that mean? You think that before the war, you think there's any chance in hell that before the war, the North would even try to free the slaves? There's no bill in Congress. What do you mean they're going to free the slaves? How do you right, without a bill? Slavery is written into the Constitution in 4 places. 4 places in the Constitution. To free the slaves, you have to have an amendment. That's 2/3 vote, right? And that's 3/4 of the state ratification. All right, so there's no way they would have tried to do so before the war. When one, it would start a war by doing so, and they were desperate to avoid a war. They did all that. They bent over backwards, protecting slavery to avoid a war. Right? You think they're going to free the slaves to start a war when they're doing everything to stop a war? That's insane. Anyone who attacks it is just a total liar or a retard. Right? And then when it would stand zero, why would you even try when it stood 0 chance of passing? Right? You're not going to get a 2/3 vote. They barely got it with northern states alone. And that's when the war is almost over. Not alone before the war, when it's going to start a war that no one wants, northern don't want. Right? And then there's roughly half the states were southern states, slave states. How are you going to get 3/4 states ratify it, right? You're not even going to get all the northern states ratified. I mean, it's just 0 chance. There was 0 threat to slavery, right? And they did everything to protect slavery, to undercut the southern excuse for secession. So there was no real threat to slavery. That wasn't the real Southern excuse. The real, and also they did this. The Northern Congress passed the Crittenden and Johnson Resolution, which vowed not to free the slaves with the Civil War. Don't give me this. I mean, five of the Union states were slave states, right? The immediate cause for the Civil War was loss of the Southern political power, which only promised to get worse in the future, given the immigration and demographics dynamics, given the economics which drew immigrants to the North, right? All this favoring the North, right? Opportunities were in the North, land expansion was in the North, right? And the principle of popular sovereignty, right, favored free statehood for almost all the remaining U.S. territories, right? So, let's see here. Do I got a map here? No map. Well, here's the United States, right? So roughly about this much of the country was settled, all right, was in Civil War. Plus you had Oregon, plus you had California, right, right. All the rest of the territory could go. Well, you had Texas also could go free or slave, right? Well, only Oklahoma uh, had stood a chance of going slave, and only New Mexico. Arizona was made free with what was that, the organic ordinance or whatever of something like 1862 or three, right? So really, all this was going to go free. The only was Oklahoma and New Mexico. New Mexico was a desert, sparsely Oklahoma was Indian territory. What did the South have? Nothing. What did that mean? Political power is going to bam to the North, right? I mean, they're done. All right, all this would go free, right? Oklahoma's Indian country. Until they said, well, we want Oklahoma too. Indians, you get out. They reneged on that. All right, I swear they reneged there. All right. All right, so all right. The loss of Southern political power really meant loss of control of legislative power, right? Right. Which, I mean, you lose House, Senate, and presidency, all right? You lose all legislative power, right? That's a legislative body plus that's veto power you're losing, right? Which determine the economic fortunes. So laws, especially the moral tariff, would spell doom for the South, which would devastate the Southern cotton slave plantation economy while boosting Northern economy. Which would only increase Northern political power. Right? I'm not going to show you all the dynamics, all the trends of tariffs. All right, I taught you all this. I can't teach it all again in this review. The underlying cause of this situation are found in the fundamental causes are the Industrial Revolution. That changed things. Machine manufacturing of textiles, right, and then other things machine manufactured, ag machines. And the divergent economic paths taken by North versus South, well, it turned out that prior to the Industrial Revolution, early in the 19th century, there was very little difference between Northern and Southern economy. They were very much identical, right? But with the invention of the cotton gin, with the boom in profitability of cotton industry, right? The Southern took an agricultural route while the North turned towards industries, right? They took divergent routes in the Industrial Revolutions. So the three big land acquisitions also was a factor, all of which benefited the North. Even the Mexican-American War, which brought in the Southern continental South, the continental Southwest, right? You would think that would benefit the South. No, that benefited the North too. I'll talk about that in a second. So it benefited the North in terms of land, resources, economic opportunities, and growing demographics, right? If you got land, if you got resources, if you got economic opportunities, that's going to attract the people too, right? It's going to attract immigrants from Europe. It's going to attract people from the South who are going to bail from the impoverished South to go out west, all right? And that's going to boost Northern demographics, Northern politics, right? Because their interest, economic interest, is tied to the North. West and the North were tied together. resource development and railroad expansion and marketing of goods throughout the Americas and overseas. Um, Louisiana Purchase. Okay, so Louisiana Purchase. Well, you know Louisiana Purchase. Let's see here. I should get a map. I should get a map of the USA. That would help right here. Let's see here. Uh, I'm going to do this. Come on. All right. Let's see here. Maybe I'll do this too. Shoot. All right. Shoot. USA map. Put images here. Let's see. What's a good map here? I don't know. Oh, I'm going to go with the states map here. I'll just use this one. Okay. Oh, wait, no. I want the new. Paste that sucker. All right, so that will work. Okay, so okay, let's see here. Um, all right. Take this back here. Okay, so here's okay. Uh, Sorry, Louisiana Purchase kind of coming up here roughly. Funnel, kind of a funnel coming up here. Right, it's like a V shape. No, this is in conjunction with the Missouri Compromise. Missouri Compromise 1820 said, hey, right, there's going to be no slave states above the southern border of the Louisiana Purchase territory, except for Missouri, right? So we'll get Missouri, right, which means Louisiana, right, and maybe, all right, uh, okay, what the hell? Southern border Missouri. So Missouri's here, Arkansas. So Arkansas, these can go slave. Oklahoma, right, and Texas, right. So here's the southern border of Missouri, right there, right. But the vast majority, look at the big chunk here is going to go free, right. And then of course you had the Kansas-Nebraska Act, so forth. That's coming later, right. But then you had next big thing was the Mexican-American War and the taking of the continental Southwest So we acquired all this territory here, part of Oklahoma, uh, part of Colorado, chunk of Wyoming, all the going across here. All of this, right? Gadsden Purchase was a little bit later down here, right? But all the Southwest was taken with the Mexican-American War. Now you would think this would benefit the South, but no, California wanted to go free, right? Why? They didn't want slavery. They didn't want slaves coming in, taking their opportunity, taking their agriculture, right? Taking chance of getting rich with gold, right? The slave plantation owners buying up everything. They wanted to go free. They went free, right? Then everything else pretty much wanted to go free, except for Oklahoma and New Mexico. Remember we said Oklahoma's desert? I mean, Arizona's desert too. Nevada's largely, Utah is a lot of desert, right? But this is desert, sparsely populated, right? Oklahoma's Indian territory. There's very little white population there, right? In 1865, it's like, that's Indian territory. That's full-on Indian territory, right? When did that? Like it was like the 1890s when they said, "Oh, screw this. White people are going to take it." Right? Put that Indians on reservation. This is not your territory anymore. We're going to put you on reservations, and they took Oklahoma. All right. So yeah, let's see here. Okay. So the Mexican, but the key thing in the Mexican American War was also, in the compromise. Well, California went free, but they also said this. It was pretty much authored by Stephen Douglas, who ran against Lincoln in 1860, right? He came up with the principle of popular sovereignty, right? Really is to support his political career, right? Given that the North was dead against slavery because they wanted opportunity for themselves. They didn't want slaves taking their jobs. They didn't want slaves driving down wages. They didn't want slave plantation owners coming in and gobbling up all the land, taking away their opportunity, right? They wanted to make a life for themselves. So the only chance that he could get elected as a Democrat is to break from the Southern demand for all slavery, to promote the principle of popular sovereignty. We'll leave it up to the people, right? So he's a Democrat, and now he can be elected because he's going to say, "Oh, all right, you guys get your say in slavery. We won't shove slavery down your throat here," right? All right. So, but this principle became important because that determined the free or state things for the rest of the states going out. Even after they got what in the Kansas, Nebraska, even after they had the whatchamacallit case. Um, Spacing on the Supreme Court case. But, it was legal to have slaves up here, right? They made it legal, right? It didn't matter because the principle that prevailed was popular sovereignty, and the people did not want it. You can't force it down their throats, right? That's going to be war. And legally, right? That's the principle that's dominating. So the Oregon Treaty and the acquisition of North. So this is the Oregon Treaty, this territory here, right? That's required. I'm not sure how much of Montana, right? I know Idaho was part of it, right? But and this is all going to go free, right? These things spell doom for the South. Demographics, resource availability, economic opportunity. The South is done. What do they got? Indian Territory and New Mexico. And this was understood by 1850. This trajectory was obvious, and so the writing was on the wall. The die was cast for either a Southern secession or Southern subjugation to the North political. The South is going to be the slaves politically to the North. The North is going to dominate, right? John C. Calhoun stated this a decade before, in 1850, a decade before the Civil War. Economically, the only hope for the Southern elites was to check out of the Union, but that meant war. And now the Southern elites were too few. They weren't the 1%, they were the 0.1%, right? They couldn't fight the North. They're the ones who are going to lose big time, all right? Right? So the checkout means the only chance of surviving economically was to check out of the Union. To check out of the Union meant war. Now, they couldn't fight the war, so they had to get all the poor Southern white boys to fight it. You got to scare up support. So they used fear mongering. Don't tell me there was real threat to there was no threat to slavery. Right? So they used fear mongering. Only a halfwit, honestly, a halfwit would say, "Whoa, see, the Southern states said they're going to try to free the slaves, so that meant there was real trying to free the slaves." Man, you think people don't lie? You don't think people use fear mongering? That's how they get in the wars all the time. They use fear mongering all the time, and it works every time. Right? This was classic fear mongering to whip up support. Now, to the credit of some Southerners, not all the Southerners were fooled by it. Right? But what did the Southerners? There were Southerners saying, "Screw this! I'm not going to fight for these rich plantation owners." Right? But what did the Southern political elite do? They passed laws. Right? You don't fight for them. You go to not only do you go to jail, you lose your farm. What does your family do? You're in jail. They have no means of supporting themselves. What, do they starve? Right? They're on the streets. They got to beg for. So out of that, you fight, right? They use leverage. Now today, half-witted people take this fear-mongering tactic used by Southern political elites to whip up popular support for the war as proof that the Civil War was fought to free. I mean, only an idiot would think this, right? What does that mean? A lot of people think that means there's a lot of idiots out there. I'm sorry, right? When the exact opposite was true in terms of real facts, which I showed you here. However, the exact opposite was true. The U.S. made zero move to free the slaves in Congress. The North had little political will to free the slaves. They barely freed them with Lincoln buy-in votes, when there's only northern states alone. There was zero legislative chance that the slaves would be freed before secession, right? So the South there, I mean, you're not going to get 2/3 vote for an amendment. Plus, there's no way you're going to get 3/4 of states ratifying it. It's dead. No one's going to even try. Right? Even if you tried, it's not going to work. The North guaranteed permanent protection for slavery with an amendment to the Constitution. You know what? I just thought of the way people are going to attack this. Well, the Corwin Amendment was never ratified. Oh, don't be such a dumbass, right? The Corwin Amendment wasn't ratified because right after it was passed, I mean, literally right after, Southern states started seceding, right? I mean, why are you going to pass this? Southern states seceded. They're already, the whole point was already done. Okay. So promoted as expansion. That's why it didn't get ratified, right? Promoted as expansion into New Mexico. Oh, yeah. Okay. So we said, oh, you take the New Mexico territory, and when they were talking about the New Mexico territory, that was both New Mexico and Arizona back then. That's the New Mexico territory. It wasn't until the organic ordinance that they split off Arizona, right, as preserving that as free, and passed the Crittenden Johnson resolution vowing not to free the slaves as a result of the Civil War. This is only a super brief overview. There are far more facts which I cannot state in a short summary, but it is enough to show that the notion that the Civil War was fought to free the slaves is a baseless fairy tale that only ignorant simpleton morons believe. I swear, right? If you want a complete analysis of the underlying factors that really drove the U.S. to the Civil War, watch my video again, right? Watch my video lesson. All right, so I'm getting done here. I'm not going to do the Mexican-American War. Here's a summary of the Mexican-American War. I do analysis that blows away. I swear, historians are idiots. Do they really read the documents? I went through all the documents, right? And I'm not going to go into this. It's going to take too long, right? But the U.S. started this war. We had 7 acts of war, all right? It wasn't U.S. soil, right? Where American blood was spilled. It was Mexico. I don't want to go into the whole Slidell thing was a setup, right? as a fait accompli. I'm not going to explain all this again, right? And then War of 1812. I'm not going to explain. I gave you an analysis of that, right? Let's see here. All right, so yeah, this is my Mexican-American War summary, right? I'm not going to do all that. War of 1812. I gave you a much more extensive strategic analysis of what's going on than the average historian does, right? They give you crap, right? Um, but this war, this war, the U.S. started this war, right? Undoubtedly, this war is absolute. We had a declaration of war. We started the war, right? Okay, right? Uh, and I give the analysis of the reasons why here. I'm not going to go into this again. This is just a summary of my lesson. If you want to go through this again, both Mexican American, I just gave these. I just taught you these, and and then I taught you recently all the crap we've done, all the dirty stuff we've done in the Middle East to start conflict. All right. So if you think we don't start wars, if you think we're not a warmonger nation, you're living in outer space, knowing zero facts. All right. But you know what? Social reality is going to dominate. It's conspiracy theory, right? All the idiots who know nothing are going to throw some. They're going to have one word reality: unbelievable, unreal, conspiracy theory, right? Everyone's saying so, so that's he's wrong. You know. All right. So to wrap it up, the whole purpose of this was to show you that no one should be surprised that the U.S. is driving a new Cold War, given all the wars that we start, right? Given all the war, yeah, I mean, the only way you cannot believe this is if you're totally ignorant, right? And totally self-delusional, because you're a total self-serving, chest-beating, flag-waving patriot who's egocentric, self-serving, self-deluding liar, right? And that's what people do. Why? Because it's all about self. That is a driving force behind human nature. The key characteristic of human nature is self-promotion, self-preservation, self-serving. It's just the way we're wired, right? Few people, I believe, are really sacrificing. That's unfortunate, but that's human nature.